Fish chips, peas, I think one of those curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, here between now and 1 o'clock. Lots to talk about this morning, including a government U-turn on a grooming gang's national inquiry. That is what Keir Starmer has now committed to at long last. And why has he done it? Because Baroness Casey, Louise Casey, who's been leading the review for him, says he's got to do it. So why now? And much more importantly, will Starmer's inquiry into the rape gangs solve the problem? That's the question we're asking this morning. Let me know your thoughts on it. 0344 499 1000. We've got the father of a grooming gang victim in a second. His name is Marlon West. His daughter Scarlett was brought in to those rape gangs. We'll talk about that. We'll go to the debate desk with Lucy Beresford and Maxwell Marlowe. We'll also talk about Israel, of course, and the RAF sent in over the Iran crisis. That's the front page of The Sun on Sunday this morning. We'll speak to the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, about the economy, the spending review. Will life be a little bit easier, or is it about to get a whole lot harder? And what does he think about that? With Israel and Iran, what's going on there? It's developing every minute, and Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, is joining us a little bit later on. Something I'm fascinated about here in the UK, public services, they're costing so much more, 13% more per person than before the pandemic, and guess who's paying for it? You and me. I'll talk to Mel Stride about that, and also Emma Revel, who has done a study into it. We'll talk about the UK's illegal economy. Nigel Farage says it's worth £260 billion. What are your views on that? We know there are so many people who do things cash in hand. Are we actually contributing to that if we're not getting them to pay tax? Also, a little bit later on in the programme, the first woman has led the ceremony of the keys, a 700-year-old ceremony at the Tower of London. I've seen it. It's a 7-minute ceremony. It's never been filmed. It's never been photographed. One person who's taken part in many of them is Spike Abbott, who is a former beef eater. He's going to talk to us. And his son got married at the Tower of London as well. We'll reflect on that as well. Lovely, lovely thing. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Our top question for you today: will Starmer's inquiry into the rape gangs actually solve the problem? Tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, send me dial the number and give me a call. 0344 499 1000. That's the main number. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Make your voice part of the conversation here on Talk. Well, Rachel Reeves is the Chancellor, of course. She's been out and about this morning. This is what she told Sky News, not about the economy, but what we're really, really interested in this morning, which is whether Starmer's inquiry into rape gangs is actually going to solve the problem. This is what the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, told Sky News this morning.
Quoting here, and misinformation, and those who were more or less accused of racism for raising this issue?
The most important thing is getting justice.
Well, no, this is what I've asked you is the most important thing.
Well, no, Trevor.
For many people, who were criticised in that way.
Trevor, what is the most important thing
of
here?
Course,
it is
the position of the victims. I understand
the victims,
that.
And it's not people's hurt feelings about how they've been spoken about.
Well, Rachel, he was talking absolute nonsense there, saying that we don't care about people's hurt feelings if they've been talked about for being called racist. The fact is that these rape gangs are usually, not always, but usually coordinated, and taking the people who take part in this, the people who rape children in these gangs are usually Pakistani Muslims, and people who've raised that previously have been called racist. Well, actually, it is factually true. It's not a racist point, it is factually true. Lots of white people rape people as well, rape children as well. We're not saying that doesn't happen, but what we are saying is this particular problem of rape gangs is usually a Pakistani Muslim problem. There are Bangladeshis, there are white people, there are all sorts of people who are involved in this as well. But the main issue was raised many years ago. It's been reported for 15 years, and so many people, longer in fact, and so many people have been called racist for even raising this. Well, Rachel Reeves says, oh, we don't care about hurt feelings. Well, it's not just hurt feelings, it's people who were actually targeted and lost jobs and lost all sorts of livelihoods and reputations for simply calling out the truth. Let's talk about this from a human perspective, because I want to sincerely remember the victims of all of this. Marlon West's daughter Scarlett waived her anonymity and has talked about this. Marlon is a man I've seen campaigning and talking about this on many occasions, including as part of the fantastic Channel 4 documentary on this, which we don't know whether the Prime Minister has actually watched or not. He won't tell us. Marlon, thank you for joining me this morning. I wonder, we'll get into the story of Scarlett and your heartbreaking story as a father as well, trying to do everything you could and having so many obstacles in your way. I just wonder, before we get into that, whether you can tell me your reaction to this and whether you think a national inquiry will solve or even begin to solve the problem of what happened to Scarlett and people like her.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
I welcome the inquiry. I've been working with the campaign for the last few years. It's been really, really difficult. And yes, I've been accused of being racist by the Labour Party. I'm very suspicious. One of the biggest questions I've got.
You yourself have been accused of being racist, Marlon.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What happened?
So, because I've been raised in it, the words I've been using, because it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't all British Pakistani men. It was other ethnicities as well. Mm-hmm. So the word I use is Muslims, because it's a common theme.
It's a catch-all phrase for lots of different...
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I don't think every Muslim man goes around raping. There's certain pockets. Because I've expressed this, and as you've just said, this is factual evidence.
Yep.
In my experience with my daughter, politicians do not take me serious. I feel that I am racist raising these. It's had such an impact on my life. Obviously, Scarlett's a priority. What she's gone through has ruined her life. She'll never have the opportunities me and you have had. But as far as me campaigning, I've been targeted. I've been trolled. I've been told by politicians. I either get that I'm racist or extreme right wing, and I am neither of them.
So simply for raising the fact that your daughter was raped by men who are of the Muslim faith, simply for raising that and saying that factual point, you have been smeared as a racist and you've been smeared as a far right person, simply for raising those factual points and having gone through this as a family. That is what happened to your daughter is the worst thing, the worst imaginable thing. But for you, that must have been terrible too, even that particular point.
Yeah, because, you know, historically, I'm a nurse, so historically, and I won't lie on this, so I was always a Labour supporter. Obviously not now. So I've lost friends over this because even friends who are very left see me as a racist or won't discuss it with me.
I mean, that's terrible. Marlon, just tell us Scarlett's story. Tell us what happened to her.
I'll summarise it because, you know, it literally is a book. From 14, initially she was groomed by a white adult female, but for Muslims. She was trafficked to Bradford, Birmingham. She was tortured. She was raped by over 60 men. And this went on basically, and I am cutting the story very short here, from 14 to 18. At 18, it literally just stopped overnight. I believe that was because she wasn't a child anymore.
Right, right. So
and there wasn't that currency.
So how did this start? Because the thing people will be asking at the moment is saying, you know, you are someone who is clearly a responsible person. You're clearly someone who cares about your daughter, loves your daughter. How did she get drawn into it, and what did you do to try to stop that?
So she was attacked on Halloween 2018 by a gang. And again, I'm really cutting the story short here. She started to spend time with this gang, and what she'll say, especially now, is it was a strategy to keep safe because they were targeting her, and she'd rather knock around with the bullies than be bullied herself. Now, within that group, they had a female drug dealer who used to sell them cannabis, which was the white female who initially groomed her, and she took her under her wing. And that's how it started. For me, I quickly picked up on early warning signs of having money, coming home late. It started slowly, so she'd come home late, then she'd go missing at weekends, and then it just became really extreme to the point, and as embarrassing as I'm saying this, that I couldn't keep her safe anymore. I were begging social services, I'm begging them, and I'm saying, this is grooming. No, it's not grooming, Mr. West. You're a bad parent. And eventually, and I did have to force them to put her into care. That was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I put her into care. I pushed for a full child protection order, thinking she will be safe.
So you reached a stage where you just couldn't cope anymore. You couldn't deal with that. I mean, to put your own child in care is a really, really drastic thing to do. But that was a set of circumstances that was confronting you.
Yeah, and I you know, even now I still feel so embarrassed. And, you know, I've been trolled for this. I'm a single father on my own. I couldn't do any more than what I was doing. I was driving around 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, banging on doors, trying to find where she was. But, you know, I know a lot more now because Scarlett's very vocal about it. She wasn't even in my area. She was in Bradford or Birmingham or Rochdale. And she went into care. The first care home she went to, she was sexually assaulted, which even destroyed me more because I thought she's going to be safe. So she finished up in care for about 18 months, returned back to me literally just after her 16th birthday. Social services were particularly interested then because she was 16, and the grooming started then tenfold. They were literally waiting for her to return. And the last 2 years were probably the worst ever. You know, the last place she was found, and I've said this before on interviews, was in Rochdale. And when you've got Stephen Watson, the chief constable, saying, oh, Rochdale's historic, you know, we apologise, this doesn't happen anymore. And my daughter only 2 years ago was found in Rochdale.
Well, and he is lauded, actually. You mentioned Stephen Watson there, the Chief Constable of Manchester, Greater Manchester Police. I mean, he is lauded as a police chief who kind of gets it, who might actually be able to turn things around in Manchester. Do you have confidence in him to actually get a grip of this?
not one bit. So one of the things I'm concerned about at the moment, the police have opened the investigation again, and they have identified a number of men who groomed her. Not they raped her as well, but these are and they are Pakistani men who groomed her. And they were very proactive before the Channel 4 documentary. And strangely enough, since that's been aired, it's gone very quiet.
On this inquiry now, well, I mean, you've been campaigning for it. You must have high hopes in terms of what actually happens, but I'm sure that's tempered with worry that some of this, at least some of this, will be swept under the carpet again. You must be banging your head against a brick wall, Marlon.
Yeah, and I have been for probably 6 years now. I do welcome it. What I don't want, though, is the Prime Minister to take credit for it and put spin on it, because he wouldn't meet with me. Yes, I have met with Jess Phillips a couple of times.
What about her in all of this? Because Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, she campaigned on this issue for a very, very long time, yet has been seen as dragging her feet. What's your view of her?
So, don't get me wrong, I do think she cares. As far as the discussion I've had with her around the National Inquiry, it's a straight no. She would not discuss it at all.
What were her reasons against that? Why was she saying to you, a father of a rape victim, a grooming gang victim, actually we're not going to have a national inquiry? I mean, what was the possible view or thoughts against that, Marlon?
ICSA. So, and I've had this a number of times from politicians. I have the ICSA thrown at me.
What is that? Sorry, tell us about that.
The ICSA. So the ICSA is, and it is a little bit confusing. It is this part of it what was statutory, meaning it has powers, and then there was other parts of the ICSA inquiry.
The previous inquiry, that basically saying there has been an inquiry previously, and we will implement those kind of ideas that have come through there. Okay.
What concerns me with the ICSA, a lot of it was around white institutes, Church of England, Catholic Church, football clubs, celebrities, and the part what I call street grooming. They used 3 areas. They only investigated it over 5 days. They used 3 areas, which were lovely, leafy suburbs. You know, they didn't do Rochdale or Oldham or Birmingham or Bradford. They did nice little areas. So I always found it really insulting when I have the ICSA thrown at me.
Yeah.
Because it's not a proper inquiry into street grooming.
Marlon, thank you for talking to us today. How is Scarlett now? How's she doing?
She's still traumatised. She still wakes up in the middle of the night having nightmares. She's still waiting for therapy. She's been waiting for therapy for years. She has a quality of life to some extent. What is interesting as she's got older, at one time where I couldn't keep her in the house, she doesn't go out of the house anymore. She's isolated because she's absolutely terrified of bumping into any of these groomers.
Do you see them? Do you see them on the streets?
I don't. Scarlett, I guess to protect me, will not point them out. She might say to me later, or one of them, you know, who was in the car, oh, we passed one of them. Because I probably wouldn't be responsible for my actions.
You, in your local area, are seeing people who groomed and raped your daughter. You don't know exactly who they are, but she does. And you're living with that every single day.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's really difficult. And I have moved once. So I've moved, but I'm still within the area. The problem I have is I'm very isolated anyway from family and friends. But I do, you know, I have my mum and I'm the main carer for my mother. So me moving out of the area isn't going to benefit my mum or me.
And you shouldn't have to.
And I shouldn't have to, exactly. You know, I was literally born and bred here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so sad. And this has become the dominant thing in your life, Marlon. Well, you've spoken up and you keep speaking up, and I really appreciate you doing so, and I wish you and Scarlett all the very best. Let's check in again at some stage, Marlon, and see how this is going and what you think of what the government is doing. But I wish you very, very well, and thank you for speaking to me this morning.
Could I just make one point?
Of course you can. Of course you can. Yeah. Go ahead.
So one of my concerns with the inquiry is there's a very, very low percentage of survivors what have had a prosecution. Very low. So what I want to know is, are they going to just use people where there's historic prosecutions? One of the things what we're working on at the moment is a national archive.
Yeah.
For them survivors to come forward, and then we can do a database and work with the government on that.
Okay. Marlon, thank you. Let's chat again. Marlon West there, his daughter Scarlett was raped and groomed. Sharon in Staffordshire has been in touch and says, no, an inquiry on the grooming gangs is not needed. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. We already know what's happened. Nick says this report won't solve anything. MPs are more bothered in keeping their seat. Police won't intervene in multicultural problems. The left believe anyone with issues regarding immigration are far-right thugs, and the left-wing media want to ignore it. I could cry when I hear Marlon's story. This will come to no conclusion. Things won't change, and the children involved will get no answer or resolve. Well, we're going to talk to a councillor, an independent councillor in Oldham. His name is Abdul Wahid. We'll chat to him in just a second here on Talk.
There's no doubt that he meets the honours criteria of being at the top of your profession, but also as a global icon in sport and fashion and public appearances, he meets the criteria of enhancing Britain's reputation on the world stage, which is just as important. And of course his charity work with the King's Foundation and 20 years as a UNICEF ambassador, that meets the honours criteria of voluntary service and philanthropy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now to Councillor Abdul Wahid. He is an independent councillor in Oldham. Abdul, thank you for talking to me this morning. We know that Oldham was one of the areas selected for a smaller report, but now there's going to be a national inquiry into these rape gangs. What do you think of that?
I think it's brilliant. It's a bit of a surprise because there was no indication from the government that they were interested in this. They actually said that they don't. It's not needed. So the fact that Keir Starmer has practically done a U-turn on this, it has come a bit of a shock, but a welcome shock. I think whatever findings are going to be reported in the Casey audit has probably pushed him to making this U-turn, and quite frankly, it's welcome. The fact that it's a national inquiry and it's got statutory powers is fantastic.
What is the scale of the problem in Oldham where you are?
Well, the scale of the problem is something which we would need to find out, because this has been such a long standing issue where people have believed that, you know, there's been institutional failure, where there's been cover-ups. The Labour Council here have repeatedly denied, you know, a proper inquiry. 6 or 7 times they've voted against it. So yeah, you know, we have to see it. There's been several arrests as well, which is quite also welcoming, you know, of historical cases. I think they date back to about 6 to 7 years ago that these crimes were committed, and there's been arrests made. So you know, although I can't answer what the scale of it is, are we just touching the surface, or is it a lot more?
Do you see this happening right now, Abdul? You know, you're a councillor, you're on the streets, you see people. Do you see children being groomed? Do you see or aware of the fact that this is continuing right now? Because we're told by so many people this is a historical problem, it's gone on 10, 15 years ago. Our guest previously, Marlon West, says he sees it happening right now where he is. What about you in Oldham?
Well, in Oldham, absolutely. You can't say that there's no child sexual exploitation happening anywhere, to be honest. And in Oldham, you know, you hear of reports of complaints that are happening, but maybe not the gang-related stuff, which you know is taking the headlines. That's not so prevalent. It's not something which I've come across on recent cases. It seems to be a bit historical, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking into that or trying to find the perpetrators of that.
Abdul, I hope you don't mind me asking you your ethnic background, but someone called Abdul Wahid, I presume that you are perhaps a Pakistani Muslim yourself, is that correct?
I certainly am, yes. I'm a Pakistani Muslim.
And you're standing up, you're going on national broadcaster talking about this, saying you welcome an inquiry, that this is an issue. Will that cause problems for you, standing up about this?
Initially, when I took this stance, I've been a councillor myself for 2 years, and I recall when I wasn't in this position, and obviously I'm still a resident in Oldham, and I saw all these situations arising, and I was very surprised that nobody from our representatives would speak up about this issue. So when I found myself in this position where I am a councillor, I have got a voice, and I consciously made an effort to make sure that I spoke up on this issue. I did have a little bit of apprehension which way it's going to go, whether I'm going to get any kind of form of backlash. Now, thankfully, I haven't. I've actually been celebrated across all communities, not just my own.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, what would you say? There have been people who've been called, people from various ethnicities, particularly Marlon West talked about it himself. He was called racist for simply bringing this up. Is there a cultural problem within the Pakistani Muslim culture in this country in regard to their treatment of women?
To be honest, I wouldn't want to, not that I know of. There's, you know, being a Pakistani Muslim, there's nothing which I know of that's, you know.
But we do know that these gangs are predominantly Pakistani Muslim men. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'd rather wait for this inquiry to come out fully, you know, to try to understand that. Maybe there is some sort of, you know, issue in regards to, you know, racial profiling or something, or it may be a case of, okay, well, it's happened and there's been a lack of institutional, you know, focus on this.
But where you are in Oldham, just finally, just where you are in Oldham, do you not see that there are people who don't, you know, you have integrated, you've stood up, you've stood for a councillor, you're in that area, you're speaking out about this problem. Do you not see within your own community that there are people who don't have that attitude, who don't integrate, who don't perhaps learn English, who don't hold British values. Do you see that as a problem?
Well, the cases that have come to light, we're no different. A lot of the community is no different to yourself, Peter, or anybody else. That you don't have that first-hand, knowledge of what a perpetrator is doing until it gets brought up in the news or anything like that. So it's difficult to say, but it is concerning. It is concerning that there is some issue where some of the reports that have happened, they seem to be racially targeting people, and that's not. It's not a cultural problem, as in like the whole of the Pakistani Muslim community are, this way.
I don't think anybody would say that for a second. Yeah. But what they might say is that there are some people within the Pakistani Muslim community who are highly overrepresented within these rape gangs in terms of the many convictions that have been there, and they may understandably conclude that there might be a cultural problem here.
What I would say, Peter, is that there's certainly a trend of a lack of respect, because Pakistani Muslim communities, we have a strong sense of, okay, well, we have mothers, we have sisters, and we hold them as our honor. So if that's our attitude for our women, then that has to be across the board. So like if you then racially profile and try to suggest that a white
but it's not racially profiling, though, is it? To simply look at the numbers and to say, I mean, people aren't being convicted because they're racially profiled, they're being convicted because they've done it. But then when you look at the number of people who are involved in these rape gangs who are from the Pakistani Muslim community, that is undeniable. The numbers are there. That's not a racial point. It's a factual numerical point, isn't it?
I'm not trying to defend Pakistani Muslims in any way. There, what I'm trying to say is that some of these Pakistanis that have been involved, it's been reported that they've actually racially profiled their victims.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very concerning. Because there's the intent behind it.
Yeah.
So that's something which we have to get more information about.
Okay.
It's not something which you particularly know or I particularly know, but it's certainly, this is why this audit or this inquiry with statutory powers is so welcome, because we need to get to the bottom of it. If there are people in our communities who believe that it's okay to go and do whatever they want to any children who are of a different background or come from a different community, that's absolutely wrong. Well, so we need to get to that.
Okay.
And quite honestly, this is quite welcome. It needs to happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this progresses now.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. We'll get the thoughts of our debate desk panellists, Lucy Beresford and Maxwell Marlowe, in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to our two guests there we spoke to earlier on, Marlon West and indeed Abdul Wahid, Councillor Abdul Wahid, an independent councillor in Oldham. You've been reacting to this. Paul says respect to Councillor Abdul Wahid for standing up for what is right. There should be more people like him, says Paul. This person, Jason in Whitby, says, morning Peter, and right there lies a problem. Abdul said in my community and across other communities. A community is one, but fair play to him for standing up, says Jason. Graham and Bushy says, as the men who are found guilty of grooming and raping these girls are probably dual nationals, they should be deported and barred from coming back here. That is a sentiment that a number of people have expressed coming into the building. Let's talk to Lucy Beresford, the broadcaster and psychotherapist, and Maxwell Marlowe, the political commentator, both with us on the debate desk this morning. Two very interesting interviews, and of course the grooming gangs, rape gangs inquiry that has now been ordered is a U-turn by Keir Starmer. We'll maybe get into the politics of that in a minute, but of course the victims are front and centre here. Marlon, what is your reaction?
Maxwell, not
Maxwell. Sorry,
fine,
apologies.
No, I think this is, this is huge news, and I'm sure that the victims are overjoyed to hear this. I think the only, the sad thing about this is it's going to take so long. I mean, look at how long these inquiries take, how expensive they are, and whether or not the government will actually implement the findings. And
we know a lot of this stuff already, Lucy, don't we? I mean, is an inquiry even necessary?
I worry that it is actually pushing it into the long grass, because there is so much information that's already out there in the public domain. We already know that 7 Asian men have been convicted of sexually exploiting these two white teenagers in Rochdale.
That was just on Friday,
and that was just in the last week. Lady Casey's audit, it's due to come out possibly tomorrow, but it's basically going to explicitly link Pakistani men, or men with Pakistani origin, and to your correspondent's point about the fact that they should be deported. Quite a lot of these people have been born in this country, but they are of Pakistani origin, so that's obviously a very different thing. And she is going to call for a national inquiry, and it's going to have statutory powers, which means you can compel witnesses to come forward. But we already know so much of this, and I do worry that this is simply because the likes of Elon Musk, of all people, suddenly decided that he was going to turn his fire on Keir Starmer earlier this year and make a very big deal about the fact that there hadn't been a national inquiry, and one wonders whether that has been the thing that's tipped it.
Well, I think that's what sparked it, certainly, and interesting one, Maxwell, in regard to that. I mean, you have the Prime Minister making policy on young people by watching Adolescence, which is a fictional drama. You have Elon Musk asking him for a national inquiry, which now, months on, he has done. Is there any direction here? Is there any actual clear views about, well, this is right and wrong and we should do this?
I mean, not particularly. I mean, the Telegraph says he's been led by the nose. And what I find really weird here, Peter, is that, he could have had such a win over the Tories with this, which is that the Tories didn't have a national inquiry. They refused to really do one. He could have come out very quickly and said, actually, yes, it's right that we do this in the best interests of the British people, and he just refused to do that. So now Lady Casey's review is kind of the hook he needs, but you shouldn't need a hook on things that are just, really correct morally.
Let's get into that more in a second. I want to talk about the politics of this a little bit, but I want to remember the victims more than anything else. Lucy, I know as a psychotherapist you've counselled victims of sexual assault. Will this help them in any way, knowing that this inquiry is happening, or is the fact this is in the news actually going to re-traumatise them?
It can be very traumatic to hear the stories and to know that they weren't believed. I mean, Maggie Oliver, the police officer, did such an amazing job highlighting how hard it was to get the police, the Met, the Manchester Police Force, and the members of Parliament to really take this seriously. And when you saw the stories of these people identified as prostitutes, when in fact they were rape victims. You can't be a prostitute if you're underage. You have no agency at all. The people I've worked with were not only in the UK but also in India, and it was interesting there that all of the people who were being dealt with had been groomed and raped by Muslim gangs, Muslim origin gangs. And that was the thing that I found so interesting about your interview with Abdul. He needs to be applauded for standing up within his community.
And there are so few people from that community, I'm very sorry to say, who do on all sorts of issues, including anti-Semitism.
But when you asked him, have you yourself seen this? You are from that community. Have you actually seen it within your community? That was the moment at which his speech changed. It became more staccato, and there was a sense in which he couldn't necessarily say everything that he wanted to say. It's very, very difficult still in 2025 to be able to say there is a certain group of people who seem culturally to think that this kind of behaviour, to groom young white girls who, from, let's be clear, in many cases have deeply troubled home lives and are looking for some kind of gang or family or tribe to belong to, and they start to feel like they're being noticed and they're being attended to. That is the other side of this equation, is you've got the gangs that are focusing on these girls, but the girls themselves are coming from troubled communities, and therefore there's a two-prong approach that needs to be taken here, that we need to focus on in a way, the victims so much more, because they themselves needed help, and the only help they thought they were getting were from the grooming gangs.
Let's get a voice note from Nick on this. This is what Nick has to say.
Good morning, Peter. Nick Moore from Loughborough. The heart of every sensibly and right-minded person, their heart should all go out to Marlon West, who has lived the nightmare of every father with a daughter. And he has now become the worst nightmare of this government. And they've done all they can through other means to vilify him as a racist, and they're terrified of him because he has lived experience of what actually happened. And they will still continue to silence this man, and Starmer's new inquiry will be blocked, and it will be stopped, and it will be stilted. They will not get through. They will not get to the bottom of it. Starmer will make sure of that because he is controlling the terms of reference. This cover-up will continue to go on. It's a disgrace, and my heart goes out to Marlon West. Have a good weekend, Pete.
Nick, thank you for your message there. Debbie's been in touch and said, by calling us racists and battling Brits against migrants, they're making us racist. It's all just wrong and really, really horrible what the so-called elite are doing. Sarah in Sussex says, I'm just listening to a conversation with Councillor Waheed. I take my hat off to him for speaking out about the rape gangs. I do feel that if more people from his culture spoke out against this, it would send a very strong message to our useless powers that be to address these horrendous issues, and maybe they'd stop throwing around the racist card, says Sarah. Sarah, I agree with every word of that. Neil says, Cardi P, given the potential complicity of senior figures within the Labour Party and also the police, do you really think that a national grooming gang inquiry will have the desired outcome? I don't. Mary in County Down says Starmer is actually kicking the can down the road. He can act now and act decisively. Grooming and rape of girls by predominantly Asian men is still happening. Starmer says it will take some time to establish the inquiry, but he or Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, could order police chiefs to immediately direct additional resources to investigate current abuse and save more girls who are being abused right now. Maxwell, I just want to ask, off the back of what Mary in County Down is saying there, a little bit about the politics of this. Because one of the things I often say is just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily make you wrong. If there was, and I think there will have been, Labour councillors, Labour-run councils, and other councils run by other parties as well, but people in Keir, for the purposes of this particular question, in Keir Starmer's own party, who turned a blind eye, who didn't do every single thing they could, or maybe knew some of the perpetrators, or maybe were perpetrators themselves. Does the fact that Baroness Casey is calling for this give him some cover and say, well, it's Baroness Casey, she's the one who wants this, from a political perspective? I just wonder about the mechanics of this in terms of the fact that it's going to take time and why Starmer's doing what he's doing now.
Sure. So let's start with Baroness Casey, her audits. That's really important because that does give him cover to come out and say, well, if you have to think about how Keir Starmer looks at things, there's process. He's a lawyer. It's got to be process driven. The process has now started. We'll see what the audit says tomorrow. And then that gives him the cover politically and even psychologically in his own mind to call for this inquiry. And I think what's important with the inquiry and the statutory powers, unlike, let's say, that inquiry by Rupert Lowe, which doesn't have statutory powers, is that they can now go into computer systems, they can audit records, they can call people in. That's very important. That's why the inquiry must be statutory for it to have effect. But I don't think there's going to be as much cover-up as maybe some of your, correspondents were saying, really, because at the end of the day, they're going to have, this is going to be statutory and it's going to be run by independent lawyers, and there will be pressure from political people to make sure that it is an independent.
Lucy?
Well, I thought Sarah raised a really interesting point, which is what's actually being done to prevent things happening right now? Because my worry about a statutory inquiry, we only have to look at Grenfell, we only have to look at the COVID inquiry to see that it's taking far too long. There's already so much information that we already know. We only have to speak to someone like Maggie Oliver, who has all that information at her fingertips. Yeah. Yes, people like Andy Burnham were calling for an inquiry. Yes, Jess Phillips was calling for an inquiry. What they'll do now, I have no idea. But the fact is, there are people now who are raping white girls, and we need to get that looked into, and they need to be arrested, and they need to be held to account.
Well, we're asking Maggie Oliver to come on my programme tomorrow. I'm on between 10 and 1, filling in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. Maggie's not around today, but we're asking her if she's around tomorrow. The producers are doing that behind the scenes as we speak. Just want to read out 3 more messages before we go to a break. Jason in the Lake District says Starmer won't have watched the Factually Correct Channel 4 programme about the rape gangs because it isn't a fictional Netflix series. It's so clear he has already been briefed about this inquiry. Tomorrow I think this is going to be a huge challenge to the government, and there are so many people connected to the current crop that will have a negative impact on the party. It's going to destroy a lot of their political careers. Stephen in London says there may well be an inquiry now, but they won't act on the findings. Penny in Essex finally says, good morning Peter, I wish someone would tell me and many friends and neighbours how we can stop feeling so angry all the time. Listening to Marlon West is horrendous. We're actively encouraging these people here who have no respect for our girls, abuse them, don't accept our culture, wish us harm, and it's never going to go away because none of our governments care. They might if the rape gangs rape one of theirs. The volcano is smouldering, says Penny in Essex. We're asking the question, will Starmer's inquiry into rape gangs solve the problem? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll be back in the debate desk with Lucy and with Maxwell in a second. Stay with us.
I mean, this is a 1,000-year-old institution that has done this, and they've learned so many lessons, and Harry and Meghan continue to not. I mean, there's no real justification for the termination, but I know that at this point in time, we've hit like 20 people that they've blown through since they've moved to California. And how negative, I mean, how toxic must this workplace be to burn through so many people and accomplish so.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Rachel Reeves has been talking to Sky News this morning. We've already heard her views on grooming gangs, but the big international story, and it, of course, it affects us here in the UK as well. In fact, the Foreign Office is advising against all travel to Israel at the moment. But in terms of our relationship with Israel, what we do, this Iranian threat to them, the battles between them, this is what Rachel Reeves had to say to Sky News a little bit earlier on.
Israel has every right to defend itself. We also are very concerned about Iran's nuclear deterrent. The US have also been clear they haven't been involved in these strikes to date. We have in the past supported Israel when there have been missiles coming in. I'm not going to comment on what might happen in the future, but so far we haven't been involved, and we're sending in assets to both protect ourselves and also potentially to support our allies.
Rachel Reeves also spoke to Sky News about the Iranian regime itself. This is what she had to say.
I've got no time for the Iranian regime, for the repression of their own people, and we have serious concerns, which we've expressed on a number of occasions, about the Iranian nuclear programme. But we want to see de-escalation at the moment. We are not trying to ramp up the rhetoric. We are very concerned about the developments in the Middle East because of the implications here at home, but also the implications for the Middle East.
Rachel Reeves speaking to Sky News a little bit earlier on. We actually have the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride. He's going to be on in about 10 minutes' time after the 11 o'clock news. But in the meantime, let's go back to the debate desk with Lucy Beresford and Maxwell Marlowe. Lucy, what do you make of the UK's stance in regard to what's going on with Israel and Iran?
Well, it's very interesting to hear her be very explicitly supporting Israel and very negative about Iran. There is obviously some sense in which we are not necessarily giving a green light to these countries because they don't necessarily listen to us. But the one country,
unilaterally, they don't even listen to the Americans.
That is a moot point, actually. I think it was very clear that when the first attacks happened by Israel, Donald Trump used the word unilateral. He made it very clear that, in a way, America had not been any part of that. But they must have known that something was going down, in as much as...
I think they were informed rather than consulted.
Correct.
Is what Marco Rubio implied.
That is why Donald Trump then said to families in the sort of countries nearby, please get out of your embassies. So I think they knew that something was happening. And yet, within sort of 24 hours of that, Donald Trump had been much more positive. So I think it's almost as if Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer look to Donald Trump to see what the line should be. And when you've got protesters in London protesting yesterday as they were waving Iranian flags, you can see that that's actually going to be a real tightrope for the government to walk, because that's not pro-Iran necessarily, that's anti-Israel.
Well, it's really interesting how some of these protesters in London yesterday, I mean, they don't seem to really care when Iran are, you know, telling women they can't have an education, telling them they have to dress in a certain way, throwing gay people off buildings, for example. But they really care when Israel fire rockets into Iran and kill some really dangerous, evil people. They care about what they call genocide, but apparently don't care very much about the 3.5 million people in Sudan, for example, who are victims of an actual genocide. But when Israel does it, because they're always wrong, aren't they, Maxwell?
This was what we call the Omni cause, Peter. You know, we saw actually Greta Thunberg on her yacht, you know,
Saint Greta.
Saint Greta. You know, it is the Omni cause, right? So it is climate change, anti-capitalism, and also Israel, all merging into one. Just on this point about the Iranian flags in Whitehall, if you go around the corner from Whitehall and you go opposite the Foreign Office, there is a group of people there who are on hunger strike protesting against the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who are one of the most despicable groups in the world, who are very active spying in the UK. You know, they are behind Hamas as well. You know, so the actual, you know, goodness of those people who are protesting about the IRGC, completely overwhelmed by the Omni cause people flying this, you know, totalitarian regime's flag in the streets of London. It's baffling.
But the really interesting thing is that you had, it's all very well what we think in the UK, but if you've got a country like Lebanon who is nominally, you know, supported by Iran, particularly Hezbollah, if they have come out and said to Iran, don't include us, we do not want to be involved in this particular, let's call it a spat, but obviously it's bigger than a spat. But if your proxies are coming out and saying, we don't agree with you anymore, then you know which side you need to be on, and it's not the side of Iran.
And speaking of those protesters, of course, there were many useful idiots, including some Irish politicians, who tried to do the march to Rafah across the Egyptian border, and the Egyptians reacted very negatively against them. What I want in my life is someone who looks at me the way Greta looked at that turkey sandwich. It was just pure Pleasure and desire. Right then, let's talk about cash-in-hand labour by migrants who cross the Channel, a driving force in the UK's illegal economy, apparently worth an astonishing 260 billion. Maxwell, tell us about this story.
I mean, this is baffling. That 260 billion figure is the entire illegal economy. That's drugs, that's illegal tobacco, you know, that includes that sort of labour. What I think's interesting, though, is that obviously we have these people coming over in dinghies and they're operating what we call the Deliveroo economy now, or Uber Eats or whatever else. You know, they
I'm
are...
sure both those companies would deny that they've broken the law on all of this.
Of course they would, but you can see quite clearly, I actually ordered Deliveroo a couple of weeks ago. Apparently Mary was going to deliver my Deliveroo, and a kind of middle-aged Arab man turned up on a bike, and I thought, you don't much look like a Mary, even in today's woke
maybe he
times.
identified as a Mary.
Maybe he did, but it all speaks to this one thing, which is that the government have passed various different laws, whether that is about workers' rights, whether that is about anti-slave labour and anti-gang mastery. You know, it's not doing anything, because the black market in the UK, the illegal economy, is getting out of control, and there is no solution to this, really. Even if you stop the boats tomorrow, they're still going to exploit this area. So it's a huge issue for the UK and for the police.
It's a subject that really exercises ordinary British people because it speaks to unfairness. And when you had Robert Jenrick doing his, what people called a stunt, but I thought was an absolutely brilliant initiative to try to get fare judges on
15
London
million
Underground.
people have watched it.
And it's an incredible video. In the preamble to that video, he talks about various areas of society where people are not kind of, well, they're getting away with things that they shouldn't be getting away with. And he identified Turkish barbers, which of course got a lot of Turkish barbers up in arms. But what he was really speaking to, I think, was this undergrowth economy where everything is cash in hand. You don't need any papers, you don't need any ID. And that is actually fueling what drives a lot of, it's that pull factor to get a lot of the migrants over.
You're absolutely right, but the thing is that people will pay cash in hand, and the fact is there will be people who will, you know, you've remarked upon it, there will be people who won't remark upon it and say, well, I've had my food delivered by these Deliveroo or Uber Eats or whatever drivers who don't match up with the person I've been told. And if you reported that to the police, for example, or the immigration authorities, have we got any actual confidence that anything would be done about it, Maxwell?
So definitely not. There's actually another Robert Jenrick video where he goes to a car boot sale with the police and trading standards to ask you know, these punters, you know, where did you get those tools from? Because that doesn't, they've got different markings on. It's very strange. You know, it turns out obviously they're all stolen. Your viewers and listeners will know people in that kind of white van industry who've had their vans broken into. The thing is, Jenrick turns up with his aides, one of which is a good friend of mine, Sam Bidwell, who's very involved in the rape gang stuff, but that's a side point. You know, and the police are late. So people see Rob Jenrick walking around with the camera, they pack everything away, off they go. It's gone. So there is so little trust in the police to fix these issues overall.
And that key issue of fairness and just an honest day's work for an honest day's pay is something that exercises so many of our viewers and listeners. Lucy, fairness is at the heart of so much of this.
Fairness goes to the heart of what it means to be British in a way. We laugh at everybody kind of stereotyping us for queuing, but that's because there is a sense of order in the country that you know, the first get first, and if you're in the queue, it's a bit later.
Presumably it's important psychologically as well to say, you know, this is the order of things, this is the fair order, and this is, people are being treated correctly.
But that's why this whole cash in hand story is so important, because it speaks to a wider story about the migrants and why immigration, people are so exercised not by immigration per se, but it's always about illegal immigration. It's the way in which people seem to be coming over, gaming the system, getting housed, sometimes in places that are far better than people who are nurses or people who are policemen, that actually people feel, I'm putting in a hard day's work. Why do people get everything for free?
Lucy, thank you. That's Lucy Beresford, broadcaster and psychotherapist. Thanks also to Maxwell Marlowe, political commentator. Thank you for all your comments as well. I've just had it confirmed by the producer who's working on the programme I'm working on tomorrow. I'm filling in for Julia Hartley-Brewer between 10 and 1, that Maggie Oliver will be joining me tomorrow, that indefatigable campaigner against those rape gangs. We're asking the question today, will Starmer's inquiry into the rape gangs actually solve the problem? We're asking you today. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I'm also going to ask the question of the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride. He will be with me in just a minute. answering that question and many others about the economy. And if there's things you want me to ask him, this is my show, but it's your show too. So text those in 87222 with the word talk in your text, or send me a WhatsApp. It's a very, very interesting discussion this morning on grooming gangs. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to come between now and 1.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We're asking the question today, the big question: will Starmer's inquiry into the rape gangs solve the problem? Sir Mel Stride is the Shadow Chancellor. He's going to answer that in just a second. We're also talking about Israel and Iran. They have traded more missiles overnight. We'll go to Israel. We'll also speak to the former Prime Minister there, Ehud Barak, a little bit later on in the programme. All your views are welcome, of course. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, a WhatsApp voice note, a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring. The main number for all those three things is 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has announced he's going to commission a national inquiry into the rape gang scandal following months of demands from many of his political opponents and campaigners in this. A little bit earlier on, we spoke to Marlon West. He's the father of Scarlett, a grooming gang victim. I'm going to be speaking to Maggie Oliver, the indefatigable campaigner. She blew the whistle on Greater Manchester Police. She's going to be with me tomorrow morning. I'm filling in for Julie Hart-de-Brewer between 10 and 1 tomorrow. Let's talk now to Sir Mel Stride. Actually, in just a second, we'll talk to Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. First of all, I just want to play a little exchange from Sky News a little bit earlier. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, speaking to the presenter, Trevor Phillips. This is what she had to say.
I'm quoting here, and misinformation, and those who were more or less accused of racism for raising this issue?
The most important thing is getting justice.
No, this is what I've asked you is the most important thing.
Well, no, Trevor.
For many people who were criticised in that way.
Trevor, what is the most important thing?
Of course, it's the position of the victims. I understand that.
It is the victims, and it's not people's hurt feelings about how they've been spoken about.
Well, Sir Mel Stride is with me now. Mel, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
Can I ask you a question, not just from me, but from our listener Louise, who says, can you ask Mel Stride if the Conservatives will put pressure on the inquiry team's term of reference and who the judge will be in regard to this national inquiry?
So we'll want to look at all the details, Peter, as to who's going to run it, how it's going to be run, and so on, and we'll comment when we know what those details are. But I think the main thing is that we have been pushing for this now for many, many months, and we've had a Prime Minister whose response to that has been to say things of Kemi Badenoch and Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, along the lines of us jumping on some far-right bandwagon, or as Lucy Powell put it, to be responding to dog whistle politics, which is really pretty outrageous. Now, it's good that the Prime Minister has finally buckled on this one, but it's late in the day, which is deeply regrettable.
In terms of the inquiry itself, there are many people who feel that the inquiry that took place previously under the Conservatives wasn't adequate. Why did you not have a full national inquiry in the way that Keir Starmer is now committed to when you were in government for 14 years?
Well, this has been the most awful journey of discovery, I think. Now, we did have, as you say, the Alexis J inquiry, which was rather broader in scope, but was then itself part of the process of shining a light on this whole area of grooming gangs and child sexual abuse. We did, when we were in power, actually set up a task force that tracked down 550 perpetrators and therefore spared many thousands of additional victims of their dreadful and appalling behaviour. But since Kemi Badenoch has been leader, since we've been in opposition, we've been very clear that there is a requirement now for a national inquiry, a statutory inquiry that has the right to insist that somebody appears before us, before it to give evidence, and that is where we have ended up. But what is deeply regrettable, as I say, is that it should have taken all of that additional pressure before the Prime Minister finally U-turned and agreed to this.
Do you agree with the former chief advisor to Boris Johnson that there was an institutional cover-up here lasting years, if not decades?
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting, Peter, what we actually see in the KC review, the report that will be published, I believe, tomorrow, and there'll be a statement in the House by the Home Secretary. But I think it is likely to conclude that, along with the conclusion that there should be a statutory national inquiry. There's a lot that needs to be looked at in detail here, and that has to be done without fear, without favour, without accusations about, wolf whistle politics, jumping on far-right bandwagons, etc. These are really, really important issues that we need to get to the bottom of, and we need to see justice done.
I want to talk about Israel and Iran now, the big international story, of course, over the past 48 hours. This is what the woman you shadow, Rachel Reeves, told Sky News earlier.
I've got no time for the Iranian regime, for the repression of their own people, and we have serious concerns, which we've expressed on a number of occasions, about the Iranian nuclear programme. But we want to see de-escalation at the moment. We are not trying to ramp up the rhetoric. We are very concerned about the developments in the Middle East because of the implications here at home, but also the implications for the Middle East.
Should UK forces support Israel in this? Should they be attacking Iran or helping Israel defend itself? What do you think, Sir Mel?
So I think at the moment the government has been right to send additional assets into that part of the world, so fighter aircraft and the refuelling aircraft that they need. Because what Iran has said to date is that the bases that we have over there may, in their opinion, be legitimate targets for them. So we have in Oman, the UAE, and at Akrotiri in Cyprus, important bases there, and it's right that we take those actions as a precautionary measure to defend those. I think in terms of exactly what it is right to do by way of military response or otherwise in the future is not something that one should be prejudging. I think it will depend on the precise circumstances. I wouldn't want to be drawn into hypotheticals, but the overarchingly most important thing of all is that we press diplomatically for a de-escalation, because there are no doubt there are many significant risks around what is happening. The best outcome of all, of course, is that there is negotiation and we resolve this issue of Iran apparently being very close to achieving nuclear weapons or strike capability around that. Because not least in terms of the economy, there are big risks now to the world economy as a result of what's happening.
I want to talk more about the economy in a second. You're, of course, the Shadow Chancellor, but just one more question before that. When you see pro-Palestinian protesters in the centre of London waving Iranian flags, what do you think?
Well, it's important that people have a right and the freedom to protest, but we do have laws in this country that obviously have to be adhered to as well. And for example, promoting prescribed organisations is something that the police would be dealing with. But it really depends on whether those protests are lawful or not. But as things are, as a party, we are very firmly supportive of Israel. It's right to defend itself. There are clearly major challenges and risks now in the Middle East and around Iran and its potential nuclear capabilities. But as I say, the most important thing is that we do lean into the diplomatic channels to try and de-escalate the situation.
What do you make of what Lord Hammond, Philip Hammond, has said, former Chancellor, former Foreign Secretary? He has talked about, he said this morning, that the Israelis are standing in the way of a new nuclear deal.
Well, look, I think it's difficult to know exactly where those negotiations had got to. I know there are some that say, well, you know, this was all premature because they were on the point of doing something. The reality is that the Iranians, for a very long time now, have been saying they've been pursuing a purely peaceful civil nuclear program that only needs enrichment up to about 2 or 3%. Of the uranium-235. They've been enriching up to 60%, and weapons grade is about 90%, and you could see a scenario in which they could sprint towards that very quickly, and I think that is deeply worrying. So I do think it's important that we stand by Israel around those issues where there would otherwise and maybe huge risks to the region and the world more widely.
Sir Mel, we're quite a way into this interview. Let's finally talk about your portfolio and the economics. Apologies, it's taken us a while to get there, but there's so many other stories around today. You hinted there about what is happening economically because of the Middle East. We're seeing oil prices, of course, have gone up to a huge degree. What you know and I know, and you know as a constituency MP as well, and just a member of society, is that people are under serious pressure economically, and I just wonder what you make of a report from the Centre for Policy Studies, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the programme, talking about the fact that public spending is now 13%, the cost of public services is 13% higher now than it was pre-pandemic. I just wonder why you think that is, and also whether you think taxpayers are actually getting value for money. We're taxed under the Conservatives and now under Labour, the highest since the Second World War as a proportion of what the country makes of GDP. But are we actually getting value for money from public services?
No. I mean, if you look at the public sector and you look at productivity, it's been way too low. And in fact, in the health service since the pandemic, it's actually gone backwards. The answer to your question in one word, you know, if one word can sum it up, Peter, is growth, or rather a lack of growth over actually decades. And
because Labour really bet the farm on that. Labour bet the farm on growth. They said they need to get growth to get their economic plans moving. I mean, how would the Conservatives get growth?
So, well, they went about it entirely the wrong way. So very quickly what they did was they came into office, layered up taxes on businesses, which destroyed growth. They talked down the economy, which extinguished the animal spirits. They borrowed a vast amount of money and they've got huge spending going on in future spending plans. That has stoked inflation, that's kept interest rates higher for longer, and they're adding to our national debt, and those higher interest rates on that national debt mean that we're actually spending 100 billion a year, which is twice the defence budget, just servicing that debt. So the approach has got to be very different going forward, and that is why I am working with my colleagues on a radical, a responsible approach, but nonetheless a radical rewiring of our economy so that we can get up to the kind of growth rates at least that we were achieving before the global financial crisis of 2008, but preferably substantially beyond that, so that we can then afford to get taxes down. We need to slim the size of the state down. We need to do all sorts of things around skills and universities. We've got to get welfare bills down substantially and a lot of supply side reform. So the kind of big inflection point in our economic history, which is as significant, I think, as Margaret Thatcher in the 1970s and what she did to rewire the economy in the 1980s. These are different times with different challenges, but nonetheless the age of managerial incrementalism towards the economy has got to be over. Otherwise, we will not meet the aspirations of the British people.
I know you're going to say the phrase fastest growth in the G7, but that's a little bit like saying you're the tallest of Snow White's housemates. I just wonder why this growth and why the economy wasn't fixed under the Conservatives.
So I think there were definitely mitigating circumstances. So I think if you look at recent years, I think if you have an economy that gets hit by COVID and shrinks by over 10% overnight, which is the biggest knock that our economy had taken since the early 1700s and the Great Frost. If you look at the kind of massive inflationary pressure that came through the Ukraine-Russia war, that we weren't unique in this, other countries suffered in the same way, but took inflation up to over 11% very rapidly. You know, those kind of things where the government then has to step in the first instance to protect jobs through furlough, and you'll remember that there were many people that thought at the time of COVID that we'd end up with mass unemployment, the like of which we hadn't even seen in the 1980s, and also step in to support millions of low-income households from the effects of those cost of living pressures. If you do that and you spend 400 billion doing it, and you can argue about whether that was a bit too much or a bit too little or whatever, but it was a big intervention that was required. You inevitably add to the debt and the kind of pressures on tax and so on at the same time. So I think there were things that got in the way. And I think if we went back to 2010, we inherited a vast deficit from the previous Labour government, and we had to get on top of that through time, which we had substantially actually at the point that COVID then came along and took us off in the direction of another challenge. But look, in opposition, Peter, you have the opportunity to ask the deep, difficult questions about our economy and to do the hard yards to come up with a really radical approach which is really going to move the dial. We've got the time to do that, and that's what partly our time in opposition will be about.
I've just got two more questions for you, Mel, and then I'll let you go, I promise. Cash in hand by labour, by migrants who cross the Channel as a driving force in the UK's illegal economy, worth an astonishing 260 billion, according to a Sun on Sunday investigation. What would the Conservatives do to try to stop the black economy?
So I think it's important that we get through time tax down to the kind of levels that most people feel is fair and reasonable. And one of the drivers of the black economy is the fact that people just don't think that the tax system is fair and reasonable. So I think that's part of it. In terms of the illegal migration component to this, then, you know, we've got to stop the boats, and the only way that you will do that is by having an effective deterrent in place. We had built that deterrent with Rwanda, and we have planes that were ready to leave at the back end of July, beyond this last general election. The government came in and scrapped all that overnight, said they smashed the gangs, and have done anything but. In fact, the numbers are 42% higher in terms of crossings than they were last year at this stage. So, you know, we have to get that deterrent in there. And we saw what happened when we had the Albania returns deal. We found that there was a 93% drop in the number of Albanians coming here. And we saw when we passed the Rwanda legislation and before it was operationalised that there were many migrants leaving Northern Ireland to go into the Republic of Ireland because they were fearful of being removed from our shores. Deterrence works, and this government isn't doing it. So back to your very legitimate question, I think it's about how much tax you're levying on people, but it's also a story about getting illegal migration down.
Final question. A few weeks ago, your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, said that Reform UK was Corbynism with a union flag. Is that something you'd be happy to repeat?
I think to a degree that's true. I think reform is Corbyn in different colours in terms of the magic money tree. I mean, just look at some of the wild, totally fantasy economic ideas they've got. They've said that they'll take everybody out of income tax up to £20,000 worth of earnings. Well, we'd all like to do that. That comes, according to the IFS, with a price tag of up to £80 billion, which is between a third and a half of what we spend on the National Health Service.
They say that's funded.
Year.
They say that if they sort things out, that's all funded.
No. It's nonsense. One of the things they've said is that they will reduce the cost of quangos by 5% and save 65 billion over 5 years. That's about £12 billion a year. If you do the maths on that 5% being 12 billion a year, that suggests that we're spending on quangos £250 billion a year. That is just ludicrous. So none of this has been thought through. They know this, incidentally, and they're banking on the fact that at the moment politics is such that the Labour Party is doing really badly. We've had a bruising election, and us arguing that it's bad. Are people really listening yet? My argument is that we shine the light of truth on reform, and through time, I think people will start to listen, and they will understand that yes, this is Corbyn in different colours.
One thing we can say about politics in the last few years, Sir Mel, it hasn't been boring. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Mel Stride there, the Shadow Chancellor, speaking to me live from central London. Thank you, Sir Mel, for that. What do you make of what he said there? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some of your calls and voice notes and messages in just a second. Let me just read a couple actually before the break. Mel Stride, when is someone going to ask the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to explain the 22 billion black hole the Tories left, or correct the record in Hansard, says Jane. Well, certainly Mel Stride didn't ask him about it in that interview, but he said on a number of occasions he doesn't believe that is the case. Andy Coleman has been in touch and says it's finally been accepted we can't rely on local inquiries. It's also time we scrutinise local election counts. I believe we now need a centrally controlled system to ensure continuing integrity. Sir Mel Stride, if he were delivering this year's spending review, which one departmental priority would he increase funding for? Where would you find the offset? Sorry, I didn't have time to ask that question. Chirpy Graham from Huddersfield, Chirpy, says Rachel Reeves has no reason to comment on overseas issues. She's got no background or experience to comment. As a footnote, she should focus on internal problems. I think there probably were quite a few questions for her. She didn't have time for us this morning. We did ask, but of course it's perfectly reasonable, as with Mel Stride, to ask about what's going on in the Middle East. She's a senior member of the government. Great show, says Jason from Taunton. How do we know that all these people coming over here in the boats every day are not are legitimate, and before you know it, we're going to have big issues in the UK. I think we do already. Becca says Rachel from Accounts saying about not suppressing Iran's own people, that's a bit rich coming from this government. Well, look, I think that's a fair point, Becca, but the suppression in Iran is a heck of a lot worse than it is in this country. And Sue says it's disgusting that people are parading Palestinian and Iranian flags through our streets, says Sue. Lots more to come on your comments. We're also going to speak to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. That's coming up very soon here on Talk.
They're in this sort of death spiral by which they put up taxes, which reduces growth, which means that they've got to borrow more money, which means that the amount of interest they're going to pay on the borrowing goes up, which means they're going to raise taxes, and it just goes round and round and round in a circle. The economic numbers for April alone, the economy contracted by 0.3% in 1 month, and also we've seen those job numbers, really tanking with, I think, unemployment amongst young people in my constituency up a sixth just since the general election alone.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just telling my producer there about the mother of the hostage we had on yesterday. Incredible story that we spoke to. Sorry, on Friday, actually. On Friday, we spoke to a lady whose son was killed by the Israeli Defence Force by mistake, but he was taken as a hostage by Hamas. And there's so much that we want to talk about. Trump, of course, issuing a warning to Iran, Tehran and Israel exchanging strikes. Donald Trump says if Iran attacks the US in any way, it would face the might of America's military at levels never seen before, he says. Meanwhile, Israel says sirens activated overnight due to strikes from both Iran and Yemen, with reports that at least 12 people were killed. We're going to get the insight of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. He's going to be on with us in just a few minutes' time. In the meantime, an awful lot of people getting in touch on the rape gangs inquiry. That is our main story today, and we're asking you very simply and very straightforwardly whether you think Starmer's inquiry into the rape gangs will solve the problem. Now, it'll be an independent inquiry, it'll be judge-led, but he's decided to have this inquiry. Dan has been in touch on this with a voice note.
Hello Peter, it's Dan from Lingfield here. Just a very quick message. I'm looking at the National Rape Inquiry that's about to be published, and I feel it's a real coincidence that it's landed a weekend when the Israel-Iran conflict is taking off and all the media is just talking about Israel-Iran. It's very transparent what they do. They're trying to, again, brush it under the carpet, and it's just so obvious. They are really sneaky what they do. Thank you. Have a good day.
Dan, thanks for that. The thing that we do at this station, and not every other station does it, is we talk about the things that are important to you. So if you've been listening and watching for the last 90 minutes, you will know that this show talks about the things that are important to you. As soon as I saw that news yesterday, literally within a minute of that breaking news alert coming about the fact that the rape gangs inquiry was going to go ahead, a full national inquiry, I messaged the people behind the scenes here, Chris, the producer, and said, that is our lead story tomorrow. That is what we're talking about. Because I knew, because you tell me all the time, that's what you want to talk about. Yes, we're talking about Iran and Israel. That's a really important issue. It affects us here in the UK. We're going to talk to the former Prime Minister of Israel in just a second. And we're covering that. But the main story, the thing we care about most is, of course, what happens here at home, what affects people, and the fact that this is the major news story that you want to talk about as well. And this is my show, but it's your show too, and I want you to always remember that. And Dan makes a really good point there, and it doesn't matter what else is in the news, it doesn't matter what we're told to think about or what the top story is on the BBC or Sky or whatever. What we will always do on my shows is talk about, debate and deal with the news that matters to you. Let's get another voice note from JB.
Morning, Peter. I cannot understand for the life of me what is going on. What is the thinking of these politicians? There's obviously something that is frightening them to death. I think it's going to probably pull a whole load of people that are in high positions into very hot water. But the bottom line is they are allowing our young people to be traumatised and abused in the most awful way, and it is still going on, and they are doing nothing. They are sitting by protecting their own skin, and it's disgusting, and it will come to the people taking it into their own hands, and their politicians will only have themselves to blame.
JB, thanks for that. Really good points put on that. Just a friendly reminder to please keep the voice notes below a minute. JB did that, 41 seconds for JB. Also, mute me. I always want you to listen and watch me, but make sure you put your mute on so you don't hear me in the background when you're recording your voice note. But thank you, JB. Some really pertinent points there. More from Leslie as well on text. Really good points here. Leslie says, hi, Peter. Starmer needed a judge to tell him what a woman is. Now he needs a judge to tell him an inquiry into rape gangs is necessary. Starmer is a leader who can't lead. Leslie, interesting points there. Now, Baroness Casey isn't a judge, of course, but I know exactly what you mean in your sentiments there. Graham in Telford as well says the grooming gangs may find something, the inquiry may find something, but it depends if Starmer appoints to a friend to run it, and that's a very interesting point and a very good point as well, so thank you for that. We're going to talk to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, about what's happening in the Middle East in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We are speaking to Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel. I was just thinking about Dan's message there over the talking about the sort of news management of all of this and the sort of cynicism and whether, you know, this was released because of what's going on in the Middle East. In fairness, you know, all the news outlets, they really are covering this. They are talking about the grooming gangs inquiry, the rape gangs inquiry. We're doing it probably a bit more than they are, but certainly it's big news. In fairness, you know, the Chancellor was asked about it on Sky News this morning. That's something that we're talking about, other news outlets are talking about as well. It's interesting because there was some suggestion that this would try to be buried, you know, around, so Starmer couldn't be asked about it at Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday when he's back from the G7. He's in Canada at the moment in regard to that. So I'm not sure I actually agree with Dan in terms of the government covering this up. Look, there is an inquiry. It is public. They've announced it. The media is talking about it. They need to talk about it more, and that's what we're going to do tomorrow. I'm in for Julie Hartley-Brewer between 10 and 1. She's off for the day, and I will be talking about the gangs inquiry, the rape gangs inquiry. Maggie Oliver, who was the detective constable who blew the whistle on all of this at Greater Manchester Police, she is going to be there, going to be talking to me tomorrow. For the meantime, we're going to talk about the main story in the Middle East, and I'm delighted Ehud Barak, who's the former Prime Minister of Israel, joins me now. Thank you for doing so. In regard to all of the problems and what has happened over the last 48 hours, Ehud, we've seen, of course, Israel and Iran exchanging strikes. Do you believe that this is the right course of action from Benjamin Netanyahu?
I don't want to judge him. I don't know all the details, the slightest details.
You must have an opinion.
If it's true that, as our government states, that we found evidence, hard evidence, that they are moving toward weaponization, namely to cross from threshold nuclear status into active playing with weapons or crude device that can explode and create a kind of a real nuclear explosion, that might justify, because it's the last moment. Afterwards, we can do nothing, and it's I justify it. Of course, that it's the achievement is extremely impressive. Very good planning, very good preparation, and very determined execution. Everything that was missing from the 7th of October was now there, and Iran is really in its weakest point in years, without Hezbollah in Lebanon, without Assad in Syria. And after 2 failing attacks on Israel with missiles in October and April, last April.
It's interesting, Ehud. Do you see this as part of a wide sweep? Obviously, there were, Hamas is weakened, not destroyed, but weakened in Gaza. You mentioned Hezbollah there in Lebanon. Certainly in regard to Iran, was that always next? I mean, we have suggestions from some of our one of our listeners who says, could you ask Ehud Barak if this conflict is actually helping Netanyahu avoiding domestic pressures? I mean, that may well be some part of this, but do you see this as the logical next step in terms of the war against Iran and its proxies?
You know, in Hamas, the new war announced on Hamas in the last few weeks was, in my judgment, kind of something that should not have happened. We had to bring all the hostages back home and put an end to this war. That's a political war that aimed at securing his coalition. When it comes to Iran, it's something different. We are dealing with it for decades now. And we have, when I was defense minister some 12 or 13 years ago, we considered very seriously to execute such an operation, which could delay, at the time, it could delay the Iranians by 2 to 3 years. It's not clear how far we can delay them now, because they are de facto threshold state. So neither Israel nor Americans can block them from turning into a nuclear power. We can delay them by a few weeks. Probably Americans can delay them by a few months. But once they have for about 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium, which might suffice for about 10 warheads, and they have the technology, they have the scientists, so you cannot really block them. So the only actual way to block them from turning into nuclear is either to coerce them into coming on softer position back to the negotiation, or alternatives, open a full-scale war on the regime. This is something that Israel cannot probably complete alone. We need the Americans. They are now helping us with defense.
Well, what do you think, Ehud? What do you think about the Americans in all of this? Because we've had Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, almost distancing himself from this operation, making it clear it was a unilateral Israeli operation, saying they were told about it, but they weren't really asked whether they thought it was a good idea or not. I wonder how much support the Americans and indeed the British and other allies of Israel will give, and whether you think it's realistic to expect that, especially given how isolated Netanyahu is internationally.
Look, I think the Americans are basically very supportive. Without them, we could not effectively try to block with minimal damage. It's not minimal, it's very painful to the Israeli population, but comparing to the size of the attacks, it's quite minimal damage because the Americans support us with both interception of ballistic missile and interception of drones. And in this regard, in the previous attacks, even the British and the French air forces helped us, and neighboring countries are helping us, and the Americans provide us with the weapon system and with the munitions. They are okay. I understand their position. They want negotiation, so they don't want to make themselves part of Israeli attack. They expect that the Iranians will turn to them and show readiness to stop fighting and going back to negotiating room. Probably Trump intend to mobilize Putin as an influencer on the Iranians, and he might think that he can influence Israel to end it in a short time and resume negotiation. The other alternatives are more troubling. One is that instead of delaying them, it might accelerate the Iranians. They are already threshold nuclear power. So they might think if we were attacked by Israel, who is, according to the whole world, a nuclear power, backed by America, which is a nuclear power. So they might argue, you left us with no choice.
Alternative. So in your assessment, with all that in mind, I mean, that's a fascinating point. With all of that in mind, do you think Israel is safer now than it was 2 days ago, or not?
No, Israel, now it's a much better situation. For sure, it's not just source of pride, of strength. So Israel, it strengthens the deterrence.
But how likely, but within that context, Ehud Barak, how likely do you think it is that Iran could attack or would be accelerated at that point you were making a second ago?
Look, I just described honestly the situation. There is certain risk that it will accelerate, but as of now, it's extremely impressive achievements that create a certain fear and certain kind of deterrence vis-a-vis Iran. But Iran is the size of half Europe, 100 million people, very sophisticated infrastructure. It's not going to be short, and we know wars. Wars start with great applause, and time will tell how successful we will be. I hope we will be successful because it's a critical issue. We expect the world to support us to understand that Iran are the bad guys here trying and stating almost publicly that they want to see Israel disappearing from map and history and so on. And we do not intend to disappear. So we have to stand firm and fight, sometimes with with many friends and sometimes with only few of them. But
well, it's interesting you mentioned the friends and the allies, because Sipi Hotoveli, who is, as you may know, is Israel's ambassador to the UK, she told the BBC this morning Europe owes a huge thank you to Israel and the Gulf countries as well for taking this course of action. Do you think Israel's allies, and perhaps even those who aren't Israel's allies, should be grateful for this course of action in Iran? Because there are some countries who believe this actually isn't the best course of action.
I don't think that I'm in a position to criticize the British government, the French government.
You can criticize them if you like. You're very welcome.
Probably if I were a ambassador, I would say the same to the UK, but I'm not. I don't think. We respect the British forces and the French. They are basically profoundly friends of Israel. They are on our side of the democracy.
Although, actually, perhaps I could ask you in regard to that. There has been censure of by the French, by the Germans, by the British within the last 7 days of two members of Benjamin Netanyahu's government. I know you're have been a political opponent to Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm sure you disagree with the views of the two members of his coalition partners who have said those things.
I tell you an anecdote that will explain the situation. These two guys, they're extremist, racist, messianic, Jewish supremacy kind of ministers. They are the successors of the political grandfather of Rabbi Kahana, an American Jewish messianic extreme. He was elected to the Knesset. Prime Minister Shamir, who was right-wing with the Likud, right-wing biggest party and the big power of the government. When he was Prime Minister, every time that this Rabbi Kahana was going to the podium in the Parliament, the Knesset, he was leaving the assembly hall together with all his members of faction. So that was the Likud of 30 years ago. They were unready even to hear what these guys have to say. Netanyahu, for personal political survivability considerations, adapt them into his government. He gave one of them, I compared them to the Proud Boys in America, those who attacked the Pentagon. Not the Pentagon, the Capitol Hill. Those guys, he made one of them Minister of Finance with certain authority within the Minister of Defense, and the other one Minister of National Security. We criticize him. We think that they shouldn't be part of the government.
Okay.
And I think that it's not the French and British role to get rid of them. It's our role, the Israelis, to protest and change the government. I'm not for this government, but in this operation in Iran, you might find almost all Israelis supporting the government, standing with it.
Sure.
But at the same time, putting an eye on the judiciary coup and many other things were very bad one in the last 2 years. And this
Absolutely.
should be an opportunity. With the background of this success, we should end the war in Gaza and bring back home all the hostages.
All the hostages, of course, that has to be the focus. Ehud Barak, thank you very much. That's Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, joining me here on Talk. And Isaac Herzog, the President of Israel, has said, in his view, Iran is fighting to spread hatred, chaos, terror and fanaticism, while Israel, in the President of Israel's view, is fighting to eliminate a threat. What do you think about all of that? 0344 499 1000. We'll take your views in just a few minutes here on Talk.
they're in this sort of death spiral by which they put up taxes, which reduces growth, which means that they've got to borrow more money, which means that the amount of interest they're going to pay on the borrowing goes up, which means they're going to raise taxes, and it just goes round and round and round in a circle. The economic numbers for April alone, the economy contracted by 0.3% in 1 month, and also we've seen those job numbers, you know, really tanking with, I think, unemployment amongst young people in my constituency up a sixth just since the general election alone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, you may know that on my programmes I often talk about how much value for money the taxpayer is actually getting. So, of course you will have noticed, we all notice how much tax comes out of our salaries. Most of us, some people don't pay tax, but a lot of us do. And the fact is that I really wonder about the value for money we're getting, because if you look at what Tony Blair did during his time in office, he put a penny on national insurance, and he said everybody should pay a penny more in the pound on national insurance because this will mean that the NHS can have more money. And a lot of people said, not everybody, but a lot of people said, okay, we understand that. We understand the NHS needed more money at that stage, and we can pay a bit more tax, and that's okay. Not everybody said that, but a lot of people did. But the point is that now we're paying loads of tax. We're paying the highest amount of tax as a proportion of what the country makes, gross domestic product, since the Second World War. That was the case under the Conservatives. It's now the case even more so under Labour. So we've heard about this week about tough choices in the spending review, but government spending in this financial year is going to be £24,000 and £95 per adult, nearly 2/3 of the average worker's annual salary. Well, where does all that money come from? Some of it comes from borrowing, but a lot of it comes from the tax that you and I are paying. But we also know, going for GP's appointments, trying to find a school place, trying to find a house, trying to, look at the state of the roads with all the potholes, all the things we talk about every day, is there actual value for that money? I don't think there is. What about Emma Revel? She is the spokeswoman for the Centre for Policy Studies. They've got a big new report out about this. Emma, I don't want to blind people with facts and figures and statistics and amounts of money and so on, but I mean, there's obviously some of that in your report. You've looked into this in great detail. But the one statistic that really stood out for me was that this is so much higher than before the pandemic. Why is that?
Well, we saw a massive expansion during the pandemic of what the government was expected to do. You know, they took a lot more control of our lives. They also took on a lot more cost. Things, you know, obviously the cost to the health service, obviously, but the furlough scheme was a massive increase as well. And that really hasn't gone down. It hasn't gone down in any real category. Obviously, since then, we've seen interest rates grow significantly. And one of the biggest things we found that has shot up is the amount of money that the government is spending per head or per adult servicing the public debt. So obviously that debt was at a much lower interest rate 2, 3, 4 years ago. Interest rates have gone up. That's as true for the government as it is for people at home with mortgages and borrowing and things like that. So the cost of that has significantly gone up as well. And there's really no sign that that's going to go down. The trajectory we're on for the numbers we have until the end of this parliament just show almost, you know, everything just creeping up and getting more and more expensive.
I wonder, I mean, things are creeping up and becoming more expensive. Does the public care about this? I mean, people know so much money is coming out of their salaries. People do care, but what can they actually really do about it? Is there a political alternative? Reform UK say they want to lower taxes. All parties, well, not all parties, but a lot of parties say they want low taxes. We've got Labour, huge majority, and they say they want, you know, taxation will almost certainly rise in the budget.
Yeah, I mean, if you say one of the things we broke down is sort of cost of things like cost of welfare, including pensions and child benefit, cost of health. And if you say to people, well, per adult in the UK, the government is spending about £4,000 per adult on health, things like the NHS. They'll say that seems like a bargain. That seems very reasonable, and it does seem very reasonable. But if you think that that's a significant increase in what the cost was per head in 2019, and yet the NHS productivity is still I believe it's 18.5% lower than it was in 2019, 2020. So we are paying more and getting less. Outcomes are getting worse in many cases. They are static in others. There's very few areas where things are getting better. And your listeners will realise that. You'll look around and go, well, actually, you know, I can't point to much that's improving, whether it's the health service, whether it's crime, whether it's potholes, as you mentioned in your introduction, and yet it's costing us more money. So we need to not just be looking at the amount that we're spending on things, because obviously the pure nominal terms monetary figure matters, but what are we getting for that money?
Well, it's a very good point. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. Now, she's far more well-heeled than I am. She lives in a big house in the home counties, and that's fair enough, and she's done well in life, and so is her family. But she was telling me that she pays council tax of £500 a month, and her bins aren't even picked up every week. And she just sort of says, what am I paying this money for? Where is it going? Now, certainly with councils, they have a lot of different responsibilities. Social care is a big thing as well. But I just wonder whether there's a tipping point in all of this where people go, there's so much waste. You know, Reform UK has got this Doge idea now. I wonder if you think that can be successful. Can that actually help the waste in public services?
I think we do need to look at waste. We need to look at efficiencies, and, you know, reform have come up or borrowed from the United States, one way of doing that. I think we also need to have a more honest conversation with the general public, and that needs to come from the top. It needs to come from politicians like Rachel Reeves to say there are trade-offs. If we spend more on X, there is less money to spend on Y, because we cannot tax and borrow.
You're absolutely right, Emma. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're absolutely right, because what happens is that people come on all the time, mainly politicians, say we need to spend more money on this, we need to spend more money on that, we need to spend more money on that. Whereas the politician who will actually say, no, we actually need to spend less money. We need to not give these junior doctors who've already had a 22% pay rise, 29% pay rise. We actually need to not do that, because we don't have the money, and if we do have the money, we need to spend it on other things. But then if you're a member of the public, you will often see priorities of all governments, but particularly this Labour government, they're in power at the moment, saying, well, they're spending loads of things on things that our viewers and listeners don't want them to spend money on. The Chagos Islands deal, for example, overseas aid in general, the fact that there are lots of people in the public service and in the civil service, I should say, and in councils earning loads of money. There just doesn't seem to be a fairness aspect to this for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's not just about, what can government do but do more efficiently? Do we need slightly fewer civil servants, for example? Could there be efficiency?
Yes, is the answer.
Well, that's true. But also, we need to have a conversation about, does the government need to do everything it's currently doing? I think what happens, especially...
What does the government currently do that you think it shouldn't do, Emma?
Well, I think one good example that the Labour Party are committed to at the minute is nationalising the railways, and some of your viewers and listeners might think that's a good idea. But actually, where competition exists on the railways, it's done very efficiently. It leads to better services. So,
does it? I mean, there are lots of bad railways. There are lots of bad railway companies. Is nationalisation not a decent answer to all of that, some people might argue?
Well, the one line in the UK that has competition, so the East Coast Main Line has open access competition where different providers are running along the same route. It has the highest passenger satisfaction, the fewest cancellations, and the most competitive prices. And competition there is quite clearly working. If Labour decide to nationalise the railways, and they want to do it, bit by bit, it's not going to be one big moment. But then that will be even more things that the government will be controlling. There'll be less competition, less efficiency. What successive governments tend to do is take more things into their responsibility. They're very bad at actually giving things back, whether that's back to the public, back to the private sector, or even devolving it to local councils and local mayors, where we can have a bit more experimentation with what works and what doesn't, and learn from that and become more efficient as we go. And politicians just don't want to have these sort of conversations.
Emma, thank you. Appreciate you coming on. That's Emma Revel there. She's a spokeswoman for the Centre for Policy Studies. Thank you to Elsa, who's been in touch and says Starmer isn't a leader because he's incapable of leading. He's a very bad administrator at best. He takes his orders from elsewhere, so expecting him to lead is a waste of time. In my opinion, he's best at middle management and completely inadequate as Prime Minister. Starmer needs to go before he destroys the UK completely. On rape gangs, an awful lot of people getting in touch about that. Let's hear what Craig has to say.
Good morning, Peter. This is Craig from Ilkley. I think the big difference is culturally that if I'm with my group of friends and I suggest that, we go out and try and pick up some schoolies with nefarious, intentions, then I most likely end up in A&E, and in hospital for weeks and weeks, recovering from the ensued injuries. The problem is that with the community that's been accused of the majority of this grooming and rape gangs, is that if they have the similar conversation, the vast majority of them would say, yeah, okay, let's just go out and see what we can get. And that's the big difference, that culturally it's acceptable in some imported communities, but not in the homegrown mindset. Thank you.
Craig, thanks for that. I wouldn't say it's the vast majority of Muslims. There are a lot of Muslims, of course, and Pakistani Muslims as well, who make a huge contribution to this country, but it is a problem in that community and people do need to call it out. Let's hear from Glenn.
Morning, Peter. Glenn from Suffolk here. I don't know if it does mean anything, but why did he let this news come out on a Saturday night? You're more experienced than me in politics. Does that say anything? And also, what is it with appeasing this community? For the life of me, I've thought about it long and hard. Why do we appease this community? We know Labour wants the Muslim vote, we know that, but this is just awful. Absolutely awful.
Well, Glenn, you're absolutely right. It is awful. I do know Muslims in my own circle who are absolutely appalled by it and want to call it out. More of them need to do so, absolutely. I've said previously about the news, I don't think we can be that cynical about it necessarily. Well, we can be cynical, but I don't think we necessarily need to be. Mary in County Down says Starmer is trying to take the higher ground on rape gangs. He knows the party's reputation, and his own is very poor on this, particularly in crucial northern constituencies where reform has made this a key issue. He might often appear intransigent and misguided, but his instinct on this is finally right. So that is Mary in County Down. Some praise for Keir Starmer. What do you think? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk about the UK's illegal economy in a minute, worth an astonishing 260 billion. Philip Kisley is coming up. We're also going to go live to the Middle East after the break as well to talk to my friend, see how he's getting on in Israel with his grandchildren. Stay with us.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with our regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to talk about today, and tomorrow I'm in for Julie Hartley-Brewer between 10 and 1. Tomorrow she's off for the day. Lots to discuss. Channel migrants queuing for cash-in-hand jobs, secrets of the UK's £260 billion illegal economy revealed by The Sun on Sunday. Big investigation by them. We'll talk about that with Philip Kistley in a second. We're talking about rape gangs as well. Finally, there's going to be a national inquiry. That's what Keir Starmer has announced. What do you think about that? And the question we're asking today of you is, will Starmer's inquiry into the rape gangs actually solve the problem? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time to do all of that between now and 1 o'clock. Also between now and 1 o'clock, we're going to speak to a friend of mine. His name is Spike Abbott. He's a former beefeater, and he has presided over an amazing historical thing. It's happened 700 years every single night. Rain, hail, snow, pandemic, whatever. The ceremony of the keys at the Tower of London, and now a woman has led it for the first time. We'll talk to Spike, whose son recently got married at the Tower of London. It's a lovely story. You're going to stay tuned for that, but lots to discuss in the meantime. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, Sam's been in touch and says on the question about rape gang inquiries, will they make a difference, you ask? This depends on how and who is going to be chosen to conduct it. Will they call upon, interview and summon all those responsible? And more importantly, what will be allowed to be released? Lizzie says, regarding rape gangs, it will be Starmer's mates running it. I do believe a path goes to the Labour Party. Sorry to say this, it's an expensive stitch-up. As we know, it's been proven. They are quite comfortable at lying. Interestingly as well, Paul Hitchin says that it's all we know about Jess Phillips. She would not approve an inquiry. It's purely selfish, as she has such a slim majority in her constituency. Any approval for an inquiry would end her career as an MP. So much for being a champion of women's rights. She is an awful individual, says Paul Hitchin. Well, it's an interesting one from Jess Phillips. I wonder what happens now. And it's not just her, it's many members of the Labour government who said that they weren't going to have a national inquiry. Now, the Conservatives previously, they didn't have a national inquiry on the scale that has been put forward by Baroness Casey, Louise Casey. We'll see what happens in the next few days. we've had quite a reaction as well. I spoke to the father, Scarlett, father of Scarlett, a guy called Marlon West, who was on earlier on, and one person simply says, if I was Marlon, I would be taking my daughter as far away as possible to start a new life. Perry in Hertfordshire says the only reason Keir Starmer has agreed to this inquiry is so he can control it. Well, it's meant to be an independent inquiry. Do you have faith that it'll be independent? I don't think Perry does. The failings are by his party. He's not going to let things out that will cripple his already failing leadership. Leslie says the inquiry is needed to hold to account those who ignored and dismissed the cries for help from these young girls for the sake of diversity and cohesion. Well, let's talk about all of that with Philip Kistley. He's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. We're also going to talk to him about the UK's illegal economy, worth an astonishing 260 billion. We'll do that in a second. But Philip, what's your reaction to the fact that a national inquiry will now be happening? Baroness Casey's report out in the next few days. What is your reaction?
Hi, Peter. Well, first of all, it's really great to see you again.
Thanks, Philip. You too. You're always welcome to this show.
I think there's going to be an inquiry because Reform are doing so well in the polls.
Do you think that's the reason?
I think that's one of the reasons, and I think that's why it's happening now. That's why there's a U-turn. I think it's good that there's a U-turn. I think it's great that there's going to be an inquiry, but I have no faith whatsoever in the outcomes. I don't know what the aims and scope are going to be yet. Nobody does, but you can bet your life they're going to be much narrower than they should be.
Although Baroness Casey has, it's been reported anyway. We don't know what the report's not out yet, but it's been reported that she will draw a direct link between illegal immigration and rape gangs. Do you think that's a fair conclusion to draw?
I think it's one link that should be drawn. I don't think it's just about illegal immigration. I think it's about people who've lived here for years. I think it's about the small towns. I think it's about Labour councils running these small places. And I know I live in one. Okay, that are just tinderboxes. You know, they're very the balance between kind of violence and peace is just absolutely on a knife edge in some of these places. So this inquiry needs to be seen to be carried out, but whether it comes to any meaningful conclusions or not, I mean, nobody can say. But I'm just so sceptical. The point is, none of that really matters. The point is, I'm starting so sceptical because I know their track record. I know what's happened. They knew about children who were being raped by gangs of men who were related to each other, cousins, uncles, brothers, fathers. They knew about that, and they knew about pumps being used on little children to prepare them for gang rape, and yet they didn't want an inquiry then. You know, with all of that knowledge, with all of that data, with all of that heartbreaking detail, they didn't want an inquiry then, but they do now. So I am cynical, I am sceptical. At the same time, as I say, I welcome it because at least we need to get this stuff properly into the public eye.
We heard from Craig in a voice note a minute ago, and we've had some reaction to that from Benny in Belfast, who says, voice noter Craig is deluded. Some white, or as he calls them, Indigenous men, also target school-aged girls. In many cases, no harm has come to them. The difference is that police and social services are more connected to, and therefore have more intelligence on predominantly white communities, and are more likely to act when white men are reported for grooming and raping girls. They're not afraid of being racist being branded racist in those cases. The failure of community policing in certain areas with high numbers of Pakistani and other migrant populations is laid bare. These communities stay silent and the police have no inroads. What do you make of that, Philip?
Yeah, well, we know that there is negotiated policing in many of these places, so that is the first red flag. We know that the police deal with community leaders. That is another red flag. So there is no effective law and order here. There is no effective sense of community in these places. Community is such a misnomer in all of these instances. So this is about danger. This is about danger to the most vulnerable people in the country, and yet nothing has happened. Something is happening now, but God knows what it'll be. You know what I mean? And you can go back and back and back. We've known about all of this stuff for years. Many of us have been talking about this stuff for such a long time, and we've always been branded racist, we've always been branded Islamophobic, and there's always the whataboutery, well, white men do this as well, and yes, of course.
Well, I spoke to someone earlier on in the programme, I don't know if you saw the interview, Marlon West, he's the father of Scarlett, who has been a victim of this, and he says that he's been isolated in his own community and his own family simply by stating the facts of what has happened to his own daughter, that she has been raped by Pakistani gangs, by men in gangs. He knows that has happened in the last 6 or 7 years. It is happening right now, thankfully not to her, but to other people as well. We need to say, quite literally, this is predominantly a problem in the gangs-related aspect of it with Pakistani Muslims. That is factual, and that is not a racist thing to say.
No, it's just that the law needs to be seen to be done, and we need to be equal in front of the law. The problem is we're not at the moment. The law is terrified of a particular community. The law is terrified of upsetting a particular community.
Will this inquiry actually change that, do you think?
No, I don't. But as you say, lots of people within that community are appalled by this stuff. But many, many people in that community are also terrified of speaking out. So the law isn't just failing people directly, it's failing those people indirectly as well. And it's failing the vulnerable people in those communities. You imagine trying to be a young girl in a community in Batley, say, or Dewsbury, and you are being abused yourself, or your freedoms are being massively curtailed. But who can you turn to? Where can you go? You know, it's a really, really important, frightening things. And this is happening around us. And it's happened around us for years and years and years, decades. And no one has done anything about it. What we've had to do is just keep the status quo. And by keeping the status quo, whenever you do that, there are always victims. Okay, and the victims here, as I say, are the most vulnerable people with no voices. So it really is up to us to hold these people to account, to make damn sure that this inquiry is not a farce, is not a travesty, and really, really push for something meaningful.
Let's talk about a big investigation published by The Sun on Sunday today about cash-in-hand labour by illegal immigrants crossing the Channel. They say that's a driving force in the UK's illegal economy, apparently worth 260 billion quid, 2.2 billion worth of tax evaded annually by individuals or firms operating entirely in the black economy. This is figures from the National Centre for Social Research, suggesting 1 in 11 adults is now involved in the black economy here, with a high level of migration since 2022 linked to the amount of cash-in-hand work. Nigel Farage says the British people are being taken for fools again. We already know that our borders are in chaos. The Reform UK leader continued, but thanks to successive Labour and Tory governments, those arriving then go on to work illegally on the £260 billion black market economy, all the while we are paying for their accommodation. What do you make of all of this?
It's just extraordinary. I read that figure before because the Sun had done this expose, and I just can't believe it. It's incredible that this is happening. You know, what we've got is a situation in where people are just turning a complete blind eye. The authorities, the police, are turning a complete blind eye to this massive economy, which is enormous. What's that? It's what is it? $1/3 of $1 trillion there?
Yeah.
And the consequences of this, we can feel them, right? Because it's just, again, it's, as I said before, it's just keeping a lid on things, okay? The police are focused, the judiciary is focused in just keeping things barely together in this balkanised country. So what goes to the wall? Proper policing, meaningful policing goes to the wall. Crimes are going completely unpunished. So there's police understaffing. There are huge court backlogs. There's no consistent enforcement. There's a lack of resources, okay? So you just see, in London in particular, I spend a lot of time in London, you live in London, you just see it all the time. I was in Waitrose the other week and people were just taking stuff off the shelves and walking out, you know? A good friend of mine had a phone stolen. A producer on this channel had a phone stolen last week, just ripped out of her hand. Oh, it's another thing that's happening in London.
One in 3 people in this country has had their phone stolen. 1 in 3.
Yeah. It's about chaos. It's about, and when you have chaos and when people just don't know what's happening, people are just trying to keep a temporary kind of peace, then things are incredibly dangerous. I mean, I'm thinking we're going backwards at such an alarming rate. I was thinking about poverty, and I was thinking about deprivation, and I was thinking about conditions. I mean, some of these people are sharing rooms. God knows how many people to a room. Some of these people, there are about 1,000 of them coming over on boats every day. And I was thinking of Charles Booth's survey of the London poor at the end of the 19th century, where he essentially maps out the society in London, and 1/3 of people are living in terrible deprivation. Now, up until a few years ago, we couldn't have any conception of what that means, but we are going backwards so quickly. We are going to a Victorian society where all of that poverty will be on our doorstep. And I mean that quite literally, because they are decriminalising rough sleeping as well. So it will be there. You will be stepping over it even more than you are doing, Peter, when you walk into work in London.
I just want to play a little clip of Rachel Reeves now, the Chancellor. She, not talking about the economy, but actually talking about the situation in the Middle East. I'm very interested to get your views on what she says here in regard to the Iranian regime. This is what Rachel Reeves told Sky News, Trevor Phillips, a little bit earlier on.
I've got no time for the Iranian regime, for the repression of their own people, and we have serious concerns, which we've expressed on a number of occasions, about the Iranian nuclear programme. But we want to see de-escalation at the moment. We are not trying to ramp up the rhetoric. We are very concerned about the developments in the Middle East because of the implications here at home, but also the implications for the Middle East.
I've been talking to Ehud Barak a little bit earlier on, the former Prime Minister of Israel. We're getting a view from Israel in a few minutes' time. I have a friend who's out there with his grandchildren. We checked in with him yesterday. We're going to check in with him tomorrow, because it's talking about how his family is living. Philip, from the UK government's perspective on all of this, do you think they're doing the right thing in regard to their support, or perhaps you don't see them as supporting Israel in this?
Well, I think they should be more vocal in their support of Israel, because Israel is essentially taking on a theocratic dictatorship, and who knows what might happen there. If the theocratic dictatorship tumbles, then the Iranian people will be free, or at least they will have the opportunity to be free. So that's one payoff. But you can support Israel, you can support right, you can support civilization, you can stand against barbarism in a meaningful way without escalating what's already going on, because believe me, it's already escalated. Okay, what we need to do is take the side and take the moral side, take the right side. I'm worried about my friends in Israel. I'm worried about all the Jewish people in this country who are already on the receiving end of massive anti-Semitism, because... And
people flying Iranian flags at the pro-Palestinian march yesterday. Seriously, what? I mean, they don't care about a regime that oppresses its own people, that subjugates women, that tells them they can't be educated, they can't stand for office because it's a dictatorship. They throw gay people off buildings in Iran. But no, we're going to fly the flag in central London. I mean, people should have the freedom to do that. I don't want them to do it. But at the same time, what goes through the mind of someone who says, OK, we're going to do that? Well, of course we know what goes through the mind, because they're against Israel, and Israel's always wrong on everything.
They're fueled by hatred, they're fueled by ideology, they're fueled by religious fundamentalism, and they're fueled by grievance. And this is not about... it certainly isn't about the Iranian people. It isn't about any kind of oppression in any way, shape or form. This is about hatred of Jews. It's about hatred of the West. It's about hatred of Britain. It's the thing that we always see. It's a replay, and I predicted this actually yesterday on X. It's the day before. It's a replay of what we saw the day after October the 7th. Immediately there is this backlash against Jews. There is this wave of anti-Semitism. Now, I admit at the time I was quite shocked. I mean, you know that all of this stuff is rooted in anti-Semitism and anti-Westernism and anti-Britishness, but I was shocked at the vitriol. I was shocked at the depth of it. Now, I'm not, and I'm not, this is the terrible thing, Peter, I'm not even shocked that people are waving Iranian flags in the street. protesting on behalf of theocratic lunatics.
Yeah. Philip, thank you. Great sense spoken as always. Philip Kistley there, Senior Fellow with the New Culture Forum. Thanks also to Joe, who's been in touch with the WhatsApp. He says, why are we saying how great the Chancellor is earlier on for speaking out against these rape gangs? Surely in any part of Western society, if you don't speak out, you're part of the problem. We need to hold to account anyone, no matter their colour, background or religion, if they don't all speak out and put an end to this abuse. Since when was speaking out something you should be praised for, not your duty? Joe, I totally agree with you that it is everybody's duty to do so. I think it's just so rare, to be brutally frank here, it is so rare for someone from the Pakistani Muslim community to come out, to come on air, and you're very welcome to do so if you're from that community. Give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. If you want to come out today, right now, and say this inquiry is maybe not necessarily a good thing, but it's time this issue was tackled, and that it is a problem in that community, because we know it is. We've got the facts, but you so rarely hear from people in that community saying that. I want those people to have a voice. I want them to feel they have a voice. If they don't feel they can give me their name, for example, that's okay. We'll give you another name. We'll say you're anonymous. That's all right. But they're maybe it's just my faith in human nature, but I want to think there are lots of people who would like to say something but feel they can't. They're welcome to in this programme. We're the home of free speech. 0344 499 1000. But Joe, I've an absolutely fine point there. Ernie says, I think the inquiry should look at individuals who've been convicted of the rape and grooming of children. We all know it's profoundly Pakistani Muslim men, but the majority of Pakistani men are hard-working, peace-loving family men. I do work for and socialise a lot with Pakistani men. I've done so for over 50 years. We don't get much of it in Wales, if any. Perhaps the link is where these rapists live. Tristan in Bedford says, Starmer saying there will be an inquiry is just words, and it's another way he can control the narrative, and all Keir cares about is power and control by any means. He detests this country. However, slowly but surely cracks are appearing in this pathetic administration. Great show, Peter, says Tristan in Bedford. Lots more to come on this. We'll also go live to Israel, and we'll hear about the ceremony of the keys at the Tower of London. A woman has led it for the first time. I'm going to speak to a former beefeater who's been through it many times. In fact, he's been through it bringing me there. It's an incredible, historic thing, the best of British. We'll hear all about it from Spike, the former beefeater, a little bit later on in the programme. So stay with me right through to 1 o'clock here on Talk, and get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000.
Community had been complaining to their politicians, had been complaining to the police, had been complaining to social services, and just felt they were being totally ignored. No one supports the thuggery of setting fire to buildings, even a community centre. But you need to understand what was boiling up, whether it's that Darren Jones idiot on Question Time, whether it's our Islington-based human rights lawyer, knighted Prime Minister. I don't think these people even understand the scale of the problem.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Martin's in Exeter and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Martin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Morning, Peter.
Morning.
I did a quick sort of surf of Facebook this morning, and at the ground roots, I would say 10 of the MPs that I looked at, Labour MPs, are all talking about Palestine, and not one of them is mentioning the grooming scandal or anything else to do with this country. So I think at the grassroots level, they've been told Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. And they are terrified of this inquiry, which, for the record, I don't think will ever happen. I think they'll sweep it under the table and do anything they can to stop it from happening.
I agree with you that they should absolutely be talking about the grooming gangs. It's interesting that they talk about the Palestinian cause as well. Maybe they should talk about Iran in a different way to the way that some politicians have been talking about it. Of course, Iran poses a terrorist threat to the UK. A plot to attack major buildings, including the Israeli embassy in London, was uncovered just weeks ago. The men were Iranian nationals and they were Iranian men charged with spying offences in the UK. They were asylum seekers who arrived by small boats and lorries. That's the threat to this country, not just from Iranians, but from grooming gangs as well. That's what these MPs should be focusing on.
Oh, 100%. I mean, not, you say as well, but they seem to be talking exclusively about Palestine. I'm just having a look at a quick one here. There's Labour MP Rachel Maskell has written a letter to Parliament. John McDonnell, all of them are doing it.
Well, John McDonnell, you know, and his BFF Jeremy Corbyn have barely changed their views since in 40 plus years. John McDonnell, of course, is suspended from Labour at the moment. But Iran poses a very, very real and present threat to UK security. And the UK government, they cannot equivocate. We must back any action that dismantles the terrorist regime in Tehran. We've got to do that. And we've got to make sure that this inquiry works as well on grooming gangs. Have you any confidence in either of those two things happening under this government, Martin?
None whatsoever. I have full confidence that it won't happen because, without being too controversial, a lot of Labour wards are heavily implicated. That's all I'm going to say.
You're absolutely right, though, and they've got to lift the stone and see what's under it.
There'll be nothing left, Peter. They do that, there'll be nothing left. It'll be terrifying. I'm in favour of it, and I'm terrified of what they're going to find. My wife is involved professionally, or was, in this area of child grooming and what have you, and she said it's happening everywhere. She's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad she has helped in some way, Martin, but it must be very frustrating for her and for you as well, given the scale of the problem and the fact that it'll obviously take more than any one person to deal with it. But, I mean, I'm sure you've been talking about this with her today. Has she any faith in this inquiry?
No. No, because she says that in order for grooming on this scale, rape, grooming, to take place, you need four things. I can never remember the four, but you need complicity from the judiciary, you need the school to be involved, or education, you need the police to be involved, and you need medical. All of those people have to be complicit because there'll be pregnancies, there'll be, and we know, don't we, that people who reported grooming were threatened with arrest themselves. So all of those four groups, in some way, have to be either aware of it or complicit.
Okay.
Then where'd you go?
Martin, I'm going to play a few voice notes now. Just stay on the line. I'm going to ask my producer, Chris, or Tommy, to have a quick chat with you. Maybe your wife would come on and have a chat with me. If she doesn't want to, that's okay. But we'll take you off now and we'll ask Martin behind the scenes. If the wife wants to come on, she's worked for 20 years, as Martin says, with these victims. We'll have a chat with her. If she wants to, great. If she doesn't, but just an idea. Let's hear a voice note in the meantime from in regard to the Mel Stride interview. This is from Shirley.
Good morning, Peter. It's Shirley from the Cotswolds. Peter, Mel Stride, I've seen him on TV on various shows this morning. He beggars belief. Like the rest of his party, they had 14 years to deal with this situation with the rape gangs, and they did nothing. I don't know how he's got the brass neck to come out and say it. He's evading all the questions you're asking him, completely changing the subject. And this is why we love Trump and Reform Party. They say it how it is. And these people who are beating around the bush when they're asked a question, we've had enough. No, I'm afraid the Tories are definitely finished. You have a lovely day, Peter. Bye.
Shirley, thank you. Just on the grooming gangs, or rape gangs, let's call them what they are, inquiry. This person says, if Starmer doesn't deal with this in the correct manner, he's out. Jane says, many of your Tory guests seem to give the impression that just because Labour are bad, they will be the next government. They think they're in for a shock. They won't get trust back in years. And you're absolutely right, Jane. And of course, the polls would show that Reform UK are doing best in the polls. Liam says, and of course the local council elections as well, where they did very, very well. Liam says, this is how it plays out. Oh, we can't talk about that. Wait until the inquiry is finished. 4 years later, yes, keep waiting. Not long now. Gets them through the next election. We know this, right? I don't trust them. Another person says, this is Darren from Swadlincote. I think it's in Derbyshire or Staffordshire. I can't remember, but I've been to Swadlincote anyway. It's a lovely place. These rape gang inquiries will be a whitewash if Starmer Chameleon has anything to do with it. Matt says, I can't stand these obtuse activists who thrived on Palestine-Gaza train without knowing the true facts. They see it as genocide and not acts of war because they're killing civilians as a result of attacking underground military targets. Now Israel hits military targets and Iran hits home threatening our military targets. They are praised. If you are in support of Hamas and Iran, get yourself the history. Open your eyes and watch We Will Dance Again, says Matt. He's referring there to the brilliant documentary. It's on the iPlayer. Have a look at it. It tells you exactly what happened on the 7th of October in very stark detail, let me tell you. We will, of course, come back to that topic in a second. Let's play another voice note now. This is from Ian on grooming gangs.
Hi, Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. I think what will be interesting is if we do get a proper open inquiry, whether we find out that some of these cases crossed Keir Starmer's desk when he was head of the CPS. And if so, is he complicit in the cover-up? Because we all think, we all believe there's a cover-up going on. Was he in knowledge of all this stuff, and did he cover up?
Ian, I don't know the answer to that. Look, Keir Starmer would say that when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, that he actually prosecuted rape gangs, he prosecuted people, and he helped solve the problem. We know, of course, there has been complicity at all sorts of levels. I'm sure he personally would deny any complicity in any of that. What this inquiry will hopefully do, we hope it gets to the bottom of this, but so many people are just not too sure. And Rob in London says, call me cynical, but I don't trust this government one bit. I have no faith in these dishonest charlatans. The devil is always in the detail, isn't it? Let's see who's leading it and when it will start, or will it be kicked as usual down the road for years. I reckon sadly it'll be a farce. Watch this space. No trust whatsoever in Starmer and his government, says Rob in London. Martin's wife sadly not around. Maybe we'll talk to her on another occasion. That was the caller a minute ago. I said I wanted to talk to his wife. She can't just speak to us at the moment, maybe on another occasion. Matt in Hertfordshire says, I have serious concerns about who is appointed to lead this inquiry. We need concrete timelines on results. This cannot drag on for years while rape gangs continue to be free to commit their criminal activities. And thank you to Tech Up Dave as well, who has checked on Swadlincote, and it is in fact in Derbyshire. I worked for BBC Radio Derby many moons ago, and there was actually a very interesting and sadly quite funny mistake that was made on BBC Radio Derby earlier this week when one of the presenters, Ian Skye, I didn't work with Ian, but I know he's a good guy, didn't know his microphone was on, and expressed, shall we say, a lack of enthusiasm for the fact that he had cramp in his leg, and with a word beginning with F, and it was broadcast. Wasn't so good, but listen, as I always say, when these things happen, here, but for the grace of God, go I. We'll take more of your voice notes and calls in just a minute. If you want to get your call in, 0344 499 1000. We're also going to talk to my friend Lee in Israel. He's a former Conservative MP, used to work with him. Great guy. He is with his grandchildren at the moment. He's been in a shelter last night again. We spoke to him yesterday. I want to check in with him today. I want to check in with him tomorrow. I'm on for Julia between 10 and 1, just to see what's happening on the ground, what it's like for him and his family. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Fiona, who says Labour are clearly the party for the majority, and using the name-calling tactics shows them for what they are. If it wasn't for Reform UK, Labour would not be U-turning on anything, and people need to think long and hard about that. Where is Starmer? He's jetting off in pursuit of what only matters to him, the rest of the world. Well, he's off to Canada. In fact, I think he might be in Canada at the moment. The G7 is happening over the next few days. He will be back for Prime Minister's questions this week. Did Rachel Reeves say the oppression of their people in Iran? Hello, Miss Reeves. What about the oppression of our own people here in the UK? Well, certainly the oppression in Iran is far worse than in this country, let me tell you. But I think she was right to say that, and I respectfully disagree with you on that. But there is certainly oppression of people here in the UK. It's just not nearly on the same scale. John in sunny Cornwall says, great incisive show as ever. How long will it be before all the lefties who have been insisting that no national inquiry is required all come out of the woodwork and swear they always wanted one? Michael says, we've lost the plot a long time ago. I'm the son of Spanish immigrants from the 60s. My parents never had handouts, worked hard for my future. I don't recognise this country anymore. I smell a national revolt in the streets, I'm afraid, says Michael. Michael, I think you might be right. I think we are a country on the brink in many respects. I hope there aren't anything illegal. I don't want any riots. I'm certainly not encouraging that in any way. In fact, quite the opposite. I want people, if they're going to protest, to do it peacefully, or better still, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. But I do fear that this summer is going to be a tricky one for this country. Jane in Milton Keynes says, Peter, great show. I thought I should tell you the gangs are part of our safeguarding training as a foster carer. This was back in 2004 and refreshed every year, says Jane in Milton Keynes. Well, thank you for that. I want to go back to Israel now, because there's to find out from my friend Lee Scott. He's a former Conservative MP. I used to work with him, and Lee is in Israel with his grandchildren, with his family. Lee, it's good to talk to you again. How have the last 24 hours been since we last spoke?
I'm going to be honest, Peter, it's been worse than when we last spoke. It was a pretty bad night last night, with many people killed here, many buildings destroyed, many people injured. It was pretty horrific, and it's getting very hairy. I'm not afraid to tell you, I'm scared. You know, it's we spent the night again in the bomb shelter. This is just not how people should be living their lives.
So you and your family were in the bomb shelter again last night?
Yeah. It's but for me, the difficulty is that people should understand why Israel is doing this. They're doing it for us and the West. Because if you've noticed, Peter, there's not been a word from any other of the Middle Eastern countries. Nobody's saying anything, because Iran is bad news. Not the people of Iran, I want to say that again. It's the vile regime in Iran.
I think Saudi Arabia has actually commented, but of course they're conflicted in all of this. Lee, I just wonder in regard to what happens now, because the Foreign Office is saying don't travel to Israel. Hello. I mean, I know you're meant to go. Lee, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I just lost you.
Oh, okay. Just the Foreign Office here in the UK is saying don't travel to Israel. They're advising against all travel. You're there. You're seeing your family and your grandkids. I just wonder, I mean, will you be able to get back in a week's time, airspace being closed and so on?
No, I've actually spoken with the Foreign Office, and no, we can't get back. We really would like to come home, but we can't get back. We came when it was green and everyone said it was okay to come into Israel, and then sadly ours was the last flight in, and then after that the attacks happened, and since then Israeli airspace is closed. There are no flights, and I'm told there's not likely to be any flights before the 23rd of June, when we would have hoped we'd have been home by then. We came for a family function, and sadly that was meant to be tomorrow and has now had to be postponed until the earliest later in the week. But to give you one example, there was a wedding due, and it's taking place in the bomb shelter tonight. The couple are going to go ahead with their wedding and have it in the bomb shelter tonight.
Wow.
And,
so there's a couple. So just for people who might just be tuning in, there's a couple you know of who are going to get married in a bomb shelter this evening.
Yes, they're not postponing their wedding. They will just do it in the bomb shelter so that the wedding can take place, and they will then be a married couple. They're not going to allow Iranian terrorists to interrupt their wedding, and that is right and proper. I'd also like to say, because I heard some of the stuff you were saying before about the Prime Minister is now in Canada. I think the Prime Minister, although he hasn't actually wanted to say it, I believe Rachel Reeves did earlier, has put his planes here to help defend Israel, and that is the right thing to do, because Israel is doing this for Britain, France, America, and indeed the world.
So you anticipate being in the bomb shelter again this evening?
No question about it. We've already been told, yes. Yeah, I mean, we haven't been out of a resident. We're not going anywhere. We're just sitting. Everywhere's deserted. I've never actually been in a situation before. I've been to various places where there's been troubles, but I've never actually been in what is ostensibly a war zone.
I know your grandkids are lots of different ages, Lee. How do you explain it to the younger ones, what's going on? It must be terrifying for them as well, but you must want to try to protect them as much as possible, whilst at the same time not telling them what's going on.
You're absolutely right. The kids here know what's going on. You know, they see the fact of their fathers being called up into the army. They see the fact of the missiles. You can't not hear the missiles, the bangs. You can't ignore it. So most of them do know. But of course it's scary for them. And what's even scarier is it becomes a way of life.
Yeah.
That's what's scary. I don't care who it is, whether it's Iranians, everyone. No one should have to live their lives like this. But sometimes, Peter, what's got to be done has got to be done.
Lee, I know you. I've known you for years. You're a really good mate of mine, and I really appreciate you talking to me today. I can tell in your voice that you're quite emotional at the moment.
Yeah, I am. It's, there's lots of British people around that we're talking to. Everyone's of the same mind that all the media, with the exception of you and a few others, condemn Israel for everything they do. They're simply wrong. They need to look very long and hard at why Israel is doing this. If someone, as I think I said yesterday, was launching missiles after missile after missile at Ealing, what would you want the British government to do? Just smile and say thank you?
It's a very good point. Lee, can we check in with you tomorrow? I'm on between 10 and 1. If the line works, can we?
Absolutely.
Can I just want to check in with you again, both for our viewers and listeners, but also for myself, to be honest. Listen, keep safe. Yeah. I hope you're okay, and I wish you and your family very, very well, and Estelle and all your family.
Thank you, Peter. You're a star. Take care, my friend.
Chat soon. All right, thanks, Lee. That's Lee Scott there, former Conservative MP. He's a friend of mine. He's in Israel at the moment. We're going to check in with him tomorrow. I'm filling in for Julie Hartley-Brewer tomorrow between 10 and 1. We'll get your thoughts on all of this before 1 o'clock, of course, and make sure that you get your comments on the air in regard to the rape gangs inquiry. We'll talk about that as well tomorrow. Maggie Oliver, the detective constable who blew the whistle on it a number of years ago, she's joining me tomorrow on the show between 10 and 1, so I'm filling in for Julia tomorrow, as I said. I think we probably need a smile after that, because it's grim. There's a lot of grim stuff going on, and we're going to get a smile from Spike Abbott. He's a former beefeater who we're going to talk to after the break. For the first time, a woman has led something called the Ceremony of the Keys. After 700 years, it's probably the right time. It is an amazing thing, the Ceremony of the Keys at the Tower of London. It's a 7-minute ceremony. Spike is going to talk us through it. I've seen it. In fact, Spike brought me in to see it, along with Renee Hinderkamp and a couple of others. Had an amazing time. It was great. And Spike's going to tell us all about it, what it is, why it's important, why it's part of our British heritage and history. And also, Spike's son got married at the Tower of London. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about that as well. Very, very special thing. And we'll get, of course, all your voice notes and messages on all the serious stuff as well. We will do that right up until 1 o'clock. Stay with us.
boats launch from Gravelines, which is very close to the Belgian border, but they've even launched boats as far west as a town called Burke. That is 100 miles of potential launch sites. Even if you had 10,000 French soldiers stopping the boats, you still will have boats leaving. You will not stop this problem. All the while, those that pay the traffickers know that if they set foot on British soil, they'll be able to stay for the rest of their lives, either working illegally or just living off benefits.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Father's Day today, of course. If you've forgotten, here's the reminder you need. I am very excited because my dad is coming over almost as we speak. He's about to get on a plane. He's coming over, and I might even show him around behind the scenes here in the next few days if I can get him away from watching Homes Under the Hammer. So happy Father's Day, Ken Cardwell. You're amazing. You're a legend, and I'm delighted that you're coming over to hang out with me for a few days. It'll be great. Another father, a very proud father, is a man called Spike Abbott. He used to be a beef eater. And Spike, it's great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Peter. Nice to speak to you again.
Let me just tell the world why you're such a proud father, because Luke, your son, got married. You're a former beef eater. You served this country for decades. Then you served it even more by becoming a beef eater at the Tower of London. We'll talk about that in a second. But what that gave you the in to do was to have some of Luke's wedding at the Tower of London. Tell us about that.
In fact, the whole wedding took place at the Tower. Obviously, being a former yeoman warder, we've got that draw to come back to the Tower. And fortunately, the constable gave permission for Luke and Jake to get married last Saturday, which was obviously a really proud occasion for the whole family. We had 70 guests. Well, Luke and Jake had 70 guests there. And it was just an amazing day. And they got married at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Had 4 ceremonial guards. 4 of my colleagues volunteered to stand and meet them as they came out, after the service, which was in the new armories, and then we went down onto the wharf and had the reception there till the early hours of the morning. So it was a really great day.
Morning, that is absolutely wonderful stuff. So you're not today, the first Father's Day. You don't just have a son; you got a son-in-law as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
great stuff. Well, Spike, tell us about what has happened in the last few days, because the ceremony of the keys. Tell us a bit about that. You very, very kindly had me to the ceremony of the keys with my mum, and then on another occasion with Renee Hunderkamp as well, the doctor in this station. I'm really grateful for that. It was 2 incredibly special occasions. And Spike, it's a very, very long ceremony. It's happened for well, it's short in duration, only 7 minutes, but it's happened for the last 700 years. And finally, a woman was in charge of it in the last few days.
Yeah, it was AJ, Amanda Jane. She arrived a year after I did, so she came in 2016. And as you said, we've been doing the ceremony, started originally from 1340, which was during the time of Edward III. And he came back to the Tower one evening and he was unchallenged. And I thought that was ridiculous, so brought in that we had to start the ceremony, and which is now still continuing to this day. Originally used to be done at dusk, but got changed during the time of Duke of Wellington when he came in 1826. He had 1,000 soldiers based at the Tower, and he thought locking the Tower at dusk was a little bit too early, because his soldiers were in town doing the things that soldiers do, like visiting the library, visiting their grandmas in hospital,
of course,
going to the theatre,
having a cup of tea.
He changed it to exactly. So he changed it to 7 minutes to 10, which is what happens, every night that, let's just say, you witnessed. And obviously, AJ got promoted to sergeant last week, having been, as I say, there since 2016. So, and the sergeants, they're the ones that do the ceremony in the evening, actually carry the keys and the lantern and take part in that ceremony.
And what is it like, Spike, to take part in such an incredibly important and ancient ceremony, and one that a pandemic hasn't stopped it, wars haven't stopped it, ice, snow, rain, it happens every single night at the Tower of London?
I mean, for us, I did the ceremony many times, at least once a month, because we have a watchman, and as you remember, the watchman takes part as well, where we wear our red Tudor coat with the bonnet on, and it's the chief that walks in front with the 4 ceremonial guards. I think it's the Irish Guards that one at the moment, and the proudest moment is when you actually get to the end of the ceremony when they play the last post, and any ex-serviceman or current serviceman. It always makes the hairs on the back of your neck go up to hear that last post being played. And even if you're just walking through the tower, back during when the ceremony's taken and you hear that last post being played, it's such a moving piece of music. So I must have done it, as I said, during the 9-year period I was there, every month, and it was just it was still an amazing, proud occasion to take. And we have 50 people from the public witness it as well, so they come in. The public can apply online to come and witness it. So if people are coming to London, they can apply. And
bit of a waiting list, though, isn't there?
It's a what? Sorry,
it's a bit of a waiting list.
It is a waiting list. It's normally a year long. I seem to remember that you jumped that queue when you came to come and see us.
Well, you very kindly got me and showed me all behind the scenes. Honestly, it was a fascinating night. And it's interesting, usually at this point, if we're talking about something, usually what comes up on the screen would be video of what's happening or what has happened previously. But of course, the ceremony of the keys never been photographed, never been recorded, and that makes it very special as well. You've got to see it.
It does, yeah, and we emphasise that to the public that when they arrive, because now everybody just has mobile phones and instantly getting their cameras out, and it spoils the whole occasion. We've all been to the theatre and seen people with cameras out and filming things, and it just makes it even more genuine, and people then go away with the memories that they've witnessed and then tell their other friends about it. And and people do respect that. I think it was on one occasion in the whole 9 years that somebody got a camera out and they were soon scolded and reminded, that to delete it and make sure it doesn't go onto social media or anything like that. So it does make it extra special.
How do you become a beefeater?
How?
Yeah.
We were all former warrant officers from the armed forces, Army, Air Force and Navy. You need to serve a minimum of 22-year service. And you need to have the Long Service Good Conduct Medal. And about 45 people apply for each position, and then they whittle down 12 to come for a 2-day interview process. And then they pick the best man or woman for the job. He didn't want it, so I got the job instead.
Not true. And final question, Spike, do you approve of Jake? Is it a good match between him and Luke, do you think?
I certainly do. Yeah, he's been with Luke now, I think, probably 6 years, and from the moment we met him, he works here in London at Lloyd's, and they make a fantastic couple. And it was as I say, a real moving ceremony that we had last Saturday. So I couldn't be prouder that the two of them are now tied the knot and made a commitment. So it was a great day for the family, as I said. So.
Marvellous. Well, Spike, thank you so much, and thank you again for bringing me to the ceremony of the keys. You've become a mate, and I'm delighted you're now having a happy retirement in Wales as well. Everything going well for you there?
It's superb. It was a great decision. I left the Air Force at the right time after 35 years, and I left the Tower at the right time. Life's too short, and to come here and having found a property here right by the sea, we're enjoying life, and we've been made welcome by the community here. In Tenby very much, and I'm now the Sergeant at Arms actually of Tenby. So
of course you are. Of course you are.
Hat to wear.
That took about 5 minutes.
It did, yeah. The Mayor kindly invited me. He said, "Oh, well, somebody with your background, we'd like to have you as the Sergeant at Arms." So I've taken part in many ceremonies here for the town. So.
Fantastic. Spike, great to see you. I'll hopefully see you in London again soon. The Spike Abbott there, former beefeater, great man, and really interesting talking about all of that. And for the first time, a woman has led the ceremony of the keys. Honestly, if you get a chance to do it, I know 82% of our viewers and listeners are outside London, but if you've got a big trip coming up, if you've got some reason to be in London, apply for the ceremony of the keys. 7 minutes at the Tower of London. You get the whole history lesson and everything. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you to Nadine, who's been in touch and said, hi Peter, I felt quite emotional listening to your friend Lee Scott there, who'd been in the bomb shelter. His voice definitely sounded different from your previous talk with him. I hope he and his family remain safe. That's Nadine in North Ayrshire. Listen, we're going to talk to him again tomorrow. Nadine, I'm on between 10 and 1. We'll check in with him there. Terry in Slough says, this is the most useless and competent bunch of politicians, both Labour and the Tories, that I've seen in my 76 years on this earth. In my opinion, only Nigel Farage and Reform will speak for the British people. That is Terry in Slough. Let's hear a voice note now from Judith.
Hi, Peter. Judith here from Radlett. I've always said that until these hordes of young men are placed in places like Hampstead, Belsize Park, Chipping Norton, anywhere like that, that's when things will change. When they're put amongst the people that make our laws and tell us what we should be doing. And if they're put into their schools, for example, well, I'll just give you a few: Habs, Collegiate, City of London. If their young girls were placed with these so-called young men, that's when they would notice. And again, I think your earlier texter or caller said, when it happens to one of their own, and until it happens, nothing is going to change, Peter, because quite frankly, they don't care. We're just voter fodder for them, or rather, the people they appease are the voting bloc that they're interested in, not interested in us. Anyway, great show, Peter. Thanks.
Thank you, Judith. One more voice note from Sandra, please.
Hi Peter, it's Sandra from Essex. It's very good news about the national inquiry now being put in place, but I think, well, as far as I'm concerned, certainly it will only be deemed successful if those who were in the know and turned a blind eye are brought to book and either lose their jobs or actually face imprisonment. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Let's take a call from Tabitha in Hertfordshire. Tabitha, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi. I just wanted to say I'm in touch with a number of Iranians. And I think it's, to me, very interesting that they are expressing hope for the first time in many years. And if you actually go onto social media, Snapchat, TikTok, X, wherever, largely Iranians are in favour of what Israel is doing, even though, of course, it is terrifying.
Well, they hate the regime, don't they, Tabitha?
They cannot overthrow the regime on their own. And Israel hasn't entered Iran to overthrow the regime. But I think if that becomes a byproduct of taking out the regime's nuclear ability, then that's something we should definitely be celebrating, because it makes the whole world, you know, a safer place. And I think the UK should be standing by and supporting Israel on this.
Can't agree with you more. Agree with every single word, Tabitha. Thank you. Marshall is in Leeds and has given me a ring. Marshall, what would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. You and I spoke a few times just after October the 7th. My mum's an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor who is unable to get into the shelters. So for the past 2 days, she's been in the hallway rather than being able to get into a secure area.
That must be so worrying for you, Marshall. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Listen, we're lucky compared to a lot of other people. We're lucky and we're not complaining. I think it's about time people really opened their eyes and realised that, well, let's just take it back. Let's imagine had Israel not taken out Iraq's nuclear capability. Let's imagine if they hadn't taken out Syria's nuclear capability with Assad at the helm. The whole of the Middle East and probably farther afield would have been a completely different situation. And I think people need to really remember that. And people need to remember that Iran is no friend of the UK.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, we've seen in recent days. We've seen those plots. We've seen those people who came in on small boats trying to upset things, trying to sabotage our country. Marshall, we've got to leave it there just for reasons of time. But will you promise me one thing before you go? I just want you to tell your mother that all of us at Talk are thinking about her. We're wishing her well, and we hope she stays safe.
Thank you.
Okay, Marshall, great to talk to you. Sorry, we just had to end that just on grounds of time because we're coming up to the hour, but I want to thank everybody who has made the show. Chris Jacobs has been the producer, Tommy Bateson, the assistant producer, Dave Rhodes, Tech Up Dave, has been the technical operator, Luke Vincent and Davis Fang, the visual producers, Pádraig Birmingham, the video editor, and Dean Spencer has been the weekend editor. Thank you very much indeed to them. We will continue the debate tomorrow, not just on Israel and Iran, but also on the